Right then, well, it's Torah portion Beshalach this week. You got the base at the beginning. When you've got a base at the beginning of a Hebrew word, it's B, and it means in. You get the Torah portion Bereshit, in the beginning, Behar, in the mountain. This means in, and then you've got the verb shalach, which means to send away. Or it's the sending away of something. So, Beshalach, in sending away. In the first part, we're going to look a little bit more through the events that we see in Exodus 14, YHVH delivering his people from their enemies. We're going to look a little bit more at what we were looking at a couple of weeks ago, with just how involved YHVH is in everything that happens in our lives, but from that kind of specific context and what comes up through that. In the second part, we're going to look at the Song of Moshe, which is what they sing when they reach the other side of the Red Sea, because there's some amazing stuff in that, and it's really not all about what just happened to them. It's about something that's going to happen to us in the future. And this is just something amazing to see there. So we'll go through that in the second part. Then the third part is going to be a shorter part. The first part's going to be quite long. Second part's going to be normal length. And the third part's going to be a short one. And we're just going to go through from the end, when they've crossed over, they've sang the song, then being given the manna to eat in the wilderness. We'll finish and we'll look at Amalek. So starting Exodus 6:2. Oh, I hope this is the right presentation. I did edit this. Okay, no, it's Exodus 13:17 to Exodus 17:16 this week. So Exodus 13:17 says, "And it came to be when Pharaoh had let the people go, that Elohim did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, though that was nearer." And it's interesting the reason he says, "For Elohim said, lest the people regret when they see fighting and return to Mitzrayim." Now we know what happens to these people. We know what happens in the end. We know that they don't make it into the promised land. But if we only had the New Testament scriptures and the words of Yeshua, we could know that these people weren't going to make it. Okay, of the people who are called by YHVH, when Yeshua gives the parable of the sower, he gives three categories of people that don't make it in. And we can see from the parable of the sower that these people would not have made it in just by their reactions to things like this. Mark 4:16 to 17 says, "And likewise, these are the ones sown on rocky places, who when they hear the word, immediately receive it with joy. And they have no root in themselves, but are short-lived. Then when pressure or persecution arises because of the word, immediately they stumble." So YHVH says, don't take them into the land of the Philistines, because when they see this pressure, this persecution, they're going to immediately want to turn back. So we could have known where they were coming from. So we could ask the question, why is it that YHVH brought them out then? Why is he doing this? Well, as we saw a couple of weeks ago, we know that all matters work together for good to those who love Elohim, to those who are called according to his purpose. So among the Israelites who are all called out of Egypt, you've got people, and we'll see, in fact, they have all the three reactions that the people in the parable of the sower have, the people who don't make it. We're going to see them have all those reactions this week. But among the Israelites, there were people who were faithful. There were people like Moshe, possibly Aaron, and we know for sure there was Joshua and Caleb. So everything that was happening for their benefit. And we can relate that to our own lives and what's going on at the moment. You know, you've got all these people being called out of the churches, Torah movement, and we know that of the people who are called out, most of them just aren't there. You know, something arises to cause a bit of pressure on them or persecution, and it's like, are you gonna follow the word, or are you going to turn back because a bit of pressure's come up? So as we go through it and you see all the different reactions of the people who have the reactions of the people in the parable of the sower, then think on the people that we've seen that have been called out, but they're not the chosen. They've made it so far, but then something comes up and it tests them, and they're just not prepared to go on because of a bit of pressure or whatever it is. So verse 18 says, so Elohim led the people around by the way of the wilderness of the Sea of Reeds, and the children of Israel went up armed from the land of Mitzrayim. And Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him, for he certainly made the children of Israel swear, saying, Elohim shall certainly visit you, and you shall bring my house from here with you. My bones, sorry. And this is something that Hebrews 11 describes as Yosef's act of faith. The one thing that Elohim points out in his word that Yosef did that was an act of faith. He believed him in what he said, and he said, you must do this when Elohim visits you. They departed from Succoth and camped in Etham at the edge of the wilderness. And Yehovah went before them by day in a column of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a column of fire to give them light, so as to go day and night. I want you to appreciate what this was that they were doing here. Okay, they'd all been called out of Egypt, and now they're marching with Yehovah leading the way, and they're marching day and they're marching night. Okay, they're marching continuously. And it's funny, it's come up before when we've been doing Sukkot. Okay, people will be like, oh, I can't do Sukkot. I've got kids. What do you think it was like for the people who came out of Egypt? What is the purpose of Sukkot? The purpose of Sukkot is to remember when they came out of Egypt. So if we went to Sukkot and there's times of hardship at Sukkot, we're remembering what they went through when they were marching day and night behind the column of fire and the column of cloud. Verse 22 says, the column of cloud did not cease by day, nor the column of fire by night before the people. And Yehovah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel that they turn and camp before Pihahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal Zephon, camp before it by the sea. For Pharaoh shall say of the children of Israel, they are entangled in the land, the wilderness has closed them in. So this is really interesting, and this gets to the core of what we'll be looking at in this part. Okay, the reason that Yehovah said, camp here, is because Pharaoh's going to look at the fact that you camp there and that you're penned in. He's going to look at the situation and he's going to say, I can win here. I can defeat them. I'm going to go and kill them all, or I'm going to go and get them all back, whatever was in his mind. I shall harden the heart of Pharaoh and he shall pursue them. Okay, so he's faced with the realities of life. And what he does is he takes Yehovah out of the picture, which is what we do. When we are presented with something, we're presented with a choice, we address it as if, we know already how things are going to play out. Oh, I can't do that because that would end up badly for me. We take Yehovah out of it, and that's what Pharaoh's doing here. He says, but I am to be esteemed through Pharaoh and over all his army, and the Mitzrites shall know that I am Yehovah. And they did so. So he says that they'll know he's Yehovah, they'll know he's the one who's outside the time. Now this entire narrative is started with him saying, look, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov didn't know me as Yehovah. But these people are going to know him as Yehovah. So he's talking about being outside of time in that context. Every time he says, they shall know that I'm Yehovah, I'm not convinced that he's saying they'll know that I'm the one who's outside the time. But in the context that it's all started with him introducing himself in that way, this is what it's talking about. So how are the Egyptians going to know that he's outside of time when he's esteemed through Pharaoh and over all his army? Well, if we go back to the plagues in Exodus 9, 13 to 21, it says, and Yehovah said to Moshe, rise early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh and say to him, thus said Yehovah Elohim of the Hebrews, let my people go so that they serve me. For at this time I'm sending all my plagues unto your heart and on your servants and on your people, so that you know that there is no one like me in all the earth. Now if I had stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, then you would have been cut off from the earth. And for this reason I have raised you up, in order to show you my power and in order to declare my name in all the earth. So this is what he's talking about. This is what he's just referred to. They go and they speak to Pharaoh and say this. He says, you still exalt yourself against my people in that you do not let them go. See, tomorrow about this time I'm causing very heavy hail to rain down, such as has not been in Mitzrayim from the day of its founding until now. And now bring back your livestock to safety, and all that you have in the field, for the hail shall come down on every man and every beast which is found in the field, and is not brought home, and they shall die. And those among the servants of Pharaoh who feared the word of Yehovah made their servants and livestock flee to the houses. Those who didn't set their heart on the word of Yehovah left their servants and livestock in the field. So they went and spoke to Pharaoh, but it was known in Egypt that this was what was going to happen. What was said to Pharaoh, that he was going to esteem himself in this way, was known to Egypt. And now we're going to see this being fulfilled in the eyes of the Egyptians. Isaiah 41, 8-13 says, but you, Yisrael, are my servant Yaakov, whom I have chosen, the descendants of Abraham, my friend. Okay, so this is to a very specific group of people. This isn't to anyone who calls themselves Israel. This is written specifically to the chosen, specifically to those who are the seed of Abraham in the spiritual sense. We're told, if you are Christ's, if you are Messiah's, then you are Abraham's seed. Okay? And he says, you're the descendants of Abraham, my friend. What did Yeshua say? You are my friends if you do whatsoever I command you. Okay? And that's who the chosen are as well. So this isn't written to everybody who could have ever read these scriptures and thought of themselves as Israel. This is written to the chosen, whom I have taken from the ends of the earth and called from its farthest parts. I imagine that to national Israel, when they read this, it would have confused them. Well, wait there, how have you taken us from the farthest parts of the earth? Not knowing that this is actually talking about us who are here. It's talking about the ones who are chosen anyway. And said to you, you are my servant, I have chosen you and have not rejected you. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not look around, for I am your Elohim. I shall strengthen you. I shall also help you. I shall also uphold you with the right hand of my righteousness. See, all those who raged against you are ashamed and blush. They are as non-existent. And the men who strive with you perish. Now we're going to see this. We're going to see this in this Torah portion. But as I say, this is written to the chosen. And among all of these people, of whom there are the other three types of the parable of the sower, there were the chosen. And he's doing all of this specifically for their sake. It says, you seek them but do not find them. Those who struggle with you, those who fight you are as non-existent as naught, as non-existent as nothing is. For I, Yehovah, your Elohim, am holding your right hand, saying to you, do not fear, I shall help you. It's interesting. I think that when we weigh things and we think, well, I've got to do things in this way to bring about this outcome, or I've got to not follow this command in order to not bring about this outcome. Kind of the data that we've got on people is people who are disobedient, people in churches, and we see how Yehovah works in their lives. And we think, well, he's going to work the same in my life. But if we do the things that he's talking about, if we are the chosen and we follow his commandments and we are faithful to his word, then we are incredibly, incredibly few. And the way that Yehovah deals with us is different. And we must believe the promises that he gives us. Isaiah 45 says, thus said Yehovah to his anointed, to Koresh, that's Cyrus, whose hand I have grasped, to subdue nations before him, and ungird the loins of kings, to open before him the double doors so the gates are not shut. I go before you and make the crooked places straight. I shatter the gates of bronze and cut down the bars of iron. And I shall give you the treasures of darkness and hoarded wealth of secret places, so that you know that I, Yehovah, who am calling on your name, am the Elohim of Israel. So this is what he says to Cyrus. Now, Cyrus is a pagan king. He's not one of the chosen of Elohim. Well, there's nothing to suggest that he is anyway. And yet Yehovah is helping him, just like he's helping the people in our Parsha. He's helping all of the Israelites. But that's not because they're the chosen. He does it so that he works good for the ones who love him and are called according to his purpose. For the sake of Yaakov, my servant, and of Yisrael, my chosen. That's why he's doing it. I also call you by your name. I name you, though you have not known me. I am Yehovah, and there is none else. There is no Elohim beside me. I gird you, though you have not known me. So that they know from the rising of the sun to its setting that there is none but me. I am Yehovah, and there is none else. Forming light, creating darkness, making shalom and creating evil. I, Yehovah, do all of these. Everything that has been brought into being from the very beginning of time, good, evil, every event, he uses all of it for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. 2 Kings 17, 1-23 says, in the 12th year of Achaz, king of Yehudah, Hoshea, son of Elah, began to reign in Israel in Shomeron for 9 years. So this is Samaria. This is the northern kingdom. He was a king of Israel. And he did evil in the eyes of Yehovah, but not as the kings of Israel who were before him. So he was bad, but he wasn't as bad as the other ones. Shalmaneser, king of Ashur, came up against him. That's the king of Assyria. And Hoshea became his servant and rendered him a present. So now he's put under the king of Assyria. And he becomes the king of Assyria's servant. But look how he acts to the authority that he's been put under. But the king of Ashur found a conspiracy in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So, king of Mitzrayim, and had not brought a present to the king of Ashur as year by year. And the king of Ashur shut him up and bound him in prison. So he was under this guy's authority. He disobeys him and he finds himself in prison. And then Israel suffer as a result of it. And the king of Ashur went through all the land and went up to Shomeron and besieged it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Ashur captured Shomeron and exiled Israel. So this is the northern kingdom, the 10 northern tribes. He exiles them to Assyria, settled them in Chalach and Chavor, the river of Gozan, and the cities of the Medes. Now this came to be because the children of Israel had sinned against Yehovah, their Elohim. So they did evil and they were punished. They were punished through this king who was also doing evil and was being punished in his own way. And Yehovah used all of it. Who had brought them up out of the land of Mitzrayim from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim. And they feared other gods and walked in the laws of the Gentiles whom Yehovah had dispossessed from before the children of Israel and of the kings of Israel that they had made. Okay, so think of the church. Think of the church system, what they're doing. They've come out and they go after or the gods that are not described in the scriptures, and they go after the laws of the Gentiles. They do the things, they follow Christmas, they follow Easter, they follow all of the pagan nonsense that the church is involved in. Exactly the same. They were taken, they were scattered amongst the world, and then they did the same thing where they found themselves. Whom Yehovah had dispossessed before the children of Israel and of the kings of Israel that they made. The children of Israel secretly did against Yehovah, their Elohim, matters that were not right. Okay, or covertly did them. Not that he didn't know about them, but they tried to hide them from him. And they built for themselves high places in all their cities, from watchtower unto the walled city, and set up for themselves pillars and asherim on every high hill and under every green tree, and burned incense there in all the high places, like the Gentiles, whom Yehovah removed from their presence. And they did evil matters to provoke Yehovah. Now, as Charlie's looked at before when he looked at syncretism, what they were doing, they weren't just doing to other gods. They were doing a lot of these things to Yehovah, just like the church is doing all of these things, and they're doing them to Yehovah. Serve the idols of which Yehovah had said to them, do not do this. And Yehovah warned Yisrael and Yehudah through all his prophets and every seer, saying, turn back from your evil ways and guard my commands and my laws according to all the Torah which I commanded your fathers and which are sent to you by my servants the prophets. But they did not listen, and they hardened their necks like the necks of their fathers, who did not put their trust in Yehovah their Elohim, and rejected his laws and his covenant that he had made with their fathers, and his witnesses which he had witnessed against them, and went after worthlessness and became worthless, and after the Gentiles who were all around them, of whom Yehovah had commanded them not to do like them. And they left all the commands of Yehovah their Elohim, and made for themselves a molded image, 2 calves, and made an Asherah, and bowed themselves to all the hosts of heaven, and served Baal. And when they referred to Baal, they were thinking in many cases that they were doing it to Yehovah, that he was Baal, and they had a wife, and all sorts of bizarre things. And caused their sons and daughters to pass through the fire and practice divination and sorcery, and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of Yehovah to provoke them. So Yehovah was very enraged with Israel and removed them from his presence. None was left but the tribe of Yehudah alone. Yehudah also did not guard the commands of Yehovah their Elohim, but walked in the laws of Israel, which they made. Does that sound familiar? Judah, not following the Torah, but following laws that they've made. Sounds very familiar. And Yehovah rejected all the seed of Israel and afflicted them and gave them into the hand of plunderers until he cast them out from his presence. And he tore Israel from the house of David, and they made Jeroboam, son of Nevat, king. And Jeroboam drove Israel from following Yehovah and made them commit great sins. And when we were looking at Abimelech, we were looking at when somebody is led astray and they literally don't know that what they're doing is wrong. Like Abraham lied to him about the fact that Sarah wasn't his wife. So the sin that he'd done, he was literally doing in ignorance. He was doing it by mistake. He wouldn't have done it otherwise. And we looked at when leaders lead people astray, that the leaders that are leading his people astray at the moment aren't just leading them astray. They're leading them astray, and then the people are liking it. They're liking what they're being taught, and then they're going after it. And we looked at the fact that Yehovah judges these two things differently. So Yerovam drove Israel from following Yehovah. He made them commit great sins, and he will be judged for that. And it says the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Yerovam, which he did. They did not turn away from them. It was in their hearts to do these things. Until Yehovah removed Israel from his presence, they were punished, they were judged. And he spoke by all his servants, the prophets. And we saw when we looked at Ezekiel that it was in order to scatter the house of Israel among the Gentiles, to bring the Gentiles to salvation. So he used it all for the good of the chosen, who he foreknew, that he called from the ends of the earth. So Israel was exiled from their land to Ashur, as it is to this day. In 2 Kings, we hear about this from the perspective of the king of Judah. It says, it came to be in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah. That was the guy that was serving the king of Assyria, who ended up getting put in prison. King of Israel, that Hizkiah, son of Achaz, king of Yehudah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Yerushalayim. His mother's name was Avi, daughter of Zechariah. And he did what was right in the eyes of Yehovah, according to all that his father David did. So this is a good king. This is who Judah had ruling over them at the time that Israel was exiled. He took away the high places and broke the pillars, cut down the Asherah, and broke in pieces the bronze serpent which Moshe had made. For until those days the children of Israel burned incense to it and called it Nahustan. Okay, so they were worshipping this thing, and they were worshipping Yehovah in their minds, but they were doing it in their own way. They were saying, we're not going to follow all of the Torah. We're going to take this thing by which he healed the Israelites, and we're going to worship this instead, the bronze serpent. He put his trust in Yehovah, Elohim of Israel, and after him was none like him among all the kings of Yehudah, nor who were before him. So he wasn't just a good king, he was the best king that Yehudah had. He clung to Yehovah. He did not turn away from following him, but guarded his commands, which Yehovah commanded Moshe. And Yehovah was with him wherever he went. He acted wisely. That would be an amazing thing to be written in the word of Elohim about you. He rebelled against the king of Ashur and did not serve him. Difference here. Okay, this was a good king who didn't get put under this guy's authority. He rebelled against him and he did not serve him. He smote the Philistines as far as Azar and its borders, from Watchtower unto the walled city. It came to be in the 4th year of King Chizkiyahu. I want you to notice something here as well, small point. At first he was called King Chizkiyah. Here he's called King Chizkiyahu. People will say that the name of Elohim has to have Yahoo in because it's in the name of all the prophets and the people. It's not true. You've got Yeh, you've got Yuh, you've got Yah, you've got Yahoo. Some of the prophets have the name Ale in, Dani Ale. It's not a reference to Yehovah's name. Which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel. The Shalmaneser, king of Ashur, came up against Shomeron and besieged it. And they captured it at the end of 3 years. In the 6th year of Chizkiah, that is the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel, Shomeron was captured. So think about this from the perspective of the king of Judah. You've got the northern kingdom, you've got the 10 tribes above you. And a king comes in and he takes all of it. Military might. Okay, in the face of that, you look at it and say, well, I know how the world works. I know that if this guy is mightily powerful, then he's going to be able to come and take over Judah as well. That's what happens when people take Yehovah out of the picture and they only consider things in their lives as if things are going to play out as you would normally expect them. The king of Ashur exiled Israel to Ashur and placed them in Chalach and Chavor, the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. Because they did not obey the voice of Yehovah their Elohim, but transgressed his covenant, all that Moshe, the servant of Yehovah, had commanded, they did not obey nor do them. The king of Ashur sent the Tartan and the Rav Saris and the Rav Shakeh from Lachish with a great army against Jerusalem to King Chizkiyahu. And they went up and came to Jerusalem. And when they had come up, they came and stood by the channel of the upper pool, which was on the highway to the launderer's field. They called to the king, and Eliakim, son of Hilkiyahu, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Yoach, son of Asaph the recorder, came out to them. And the Rav Shakeh, that's the chief cupbearer in Aramaic, said to them, please say to Chizkiyahu, thus said the great king, the king of Ashur, what is this trust in which you have trusted? You have spoken of having counsel and strength for battle, but they are only words of the lips. And in whom do you trust that you rebel against me? And what we're going to hear through the voice of this physical enemy is the voice of our spiritual enemy, the voice of Hasatan, and the way that he will come against us when we've got a challenge and we think, I'm going to stand on the word and I'm going to do what the word says. These are the sort of lies which will come into our heads. Now look, you've put your trust in the staff of this crushed reed, Mitzrayim, on which if a man leans, it shall go into his hand and pierce it. So is the Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim, to all who trust in him. Okay, and we saw a couple of weeks ago that they've got some kind of treaty with Mitzrayim for protection. But when you say to me, we trust in Yehovah our Elohim, is it not he whose high places and whose altars Chizkiyahu has taken away? So this is what was thought, that these high places and the altars were to Yehovah. He says, aren't they his altars you've taken away? And you can imagine, perhaps further in the future, when people look at us keeping the Torah, that they might say, you're trusting in the God of the Bible. Is it not him whose son's birth you don't celebrate on Christmas and whose death and resurrection you don't celebrate on Easter? And said to Yehudah and Jerusalem, bow yourselves before this altar in Jerusalem. In other words, don't do any of that. Do the Torah. Do what's actually written in the scriptures. And now I urge you, give a pledge to my master, the king of Ashur. Then I give to you 2,000 horses if you are able to put riders on them. Just like Hasatan came to Yeshua in the wilderness and said, I'll give you all of the kingdoms of the world if you just bow the knee to me. And how do you turn back the face of one commander of the least of my master's servants and trust in Mitzrayim for chariots and horsemen? Have I now come up without Yehovah to this place to destroy it? Yehovah said to me, Go up against this land and you shall destroy it. Okay, very tricksy. Oh, do you think that I'm doing this without Yehovah's knowledge? He's the one who told me to come and do it. You should surrender to me. Then said Eliakim, son of Hilkiyahu, and Shebna, and Yoach to the Rav Shakeh, please speak to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it, and do not speak to us in the language of Yehudah in the ears of the people on the wall. And the Rav Shakeh said to them, has my master sent me to your master and to you to speak these words, and not to the men sitting on the wall to eat their own dung and drink their own urine with you? And the Rav Shakeh stood and called out with a loud voice in the language of Yehudah and spoke, saying, hear the word of the great king, the king of Ashur. Thus said the king, do not let Chizkiyahu deceive you, for he is unable to deliver you out of his hand. And do not let Chizkiyahu make you trust in Yehovah, saying, Yehovah shall certainly deliver us in this city, is not given into the hand of the king of Ashur. And these are the lies of the enemy that will come against us if we're presented with a situation where it's a case of, do I keep the commands of Yehovah or do I not? Because from everything I can work out about how the world's going to work and about how everything should work out from this point, if I keep the commands of Yehovah, something bad is going to happen to me. And I've got these people and they're saying, trust in Yehovah. Trust that if you keep his word, he will protect you. Okay? These same lies will come. Don't trust them. Don't trust them when they're saying, trust in Yehovah. No, you can work this out. This isn't going to end well for you, is it? Do not listen to Chizkiyahu, for thus said the king of Ashur, make peace with me by a present, and come out to me. Let each of you eat from his own vine and from his own fig tree, and each of you drink the waters of his own cistern. Until I come, then I shall take you away to a land like your own, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey, and live and not die. Do not listen to Chizkiyahu when he misleads you, saying, Yehovah shall deliver us. Has any of the gods of the nations at all delivered its hand from the hand of the king of Ashur? Were the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim and Chinah and Ivah? Did they deliver Shomeron from my hand? Who among all the gods of the lands have delivered their land out of my hand, that Yehovah should deliver Yerushalayim from my hand? Okay, did Yehovah come through when Betty, who was in complete disobedience to the Lord, trusted in him? He didn't, did he? No, it didn't work then, did it? For the people were silent and did not answer him a word, for the command of the king was, do not answer him. And Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Yoach, son of Asaph, the recorder, came to Chizkiyahu with their garments torn, and they reported to him the words of the Rav Shakeh. It came to be when Chizkiyahu heard it, that he tore his garments and covered himself with sackcloth. He went into the house of Yehovah, and so sent Eliakim, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and the elders of the priests, covering themselves with sackcloth, to Yeshayahu the prophet, son of Amoz. Okay, Yeshayahu's Isaiah. They said to him, thus said Chizkiyahu, this day is a day of distress and rebuke and scorn, and the children have come to birth, but there is no power to bring forth. It could be that Yehovah your Elohim does hear all the words of the Rav Shakeh, whom his master the king of Ashur has sent to reproach the living Elohim, and shall rebuke the words which Yehovah your Elohim has heard. Therefore, lift up your prayer for the remnant that is left. And the servants of Chizkiyahu came to Yeshayahu. Yeshayahu said to them, say this to your master, thus said Yehovah, do not be afraid of the words which you have heard, with which the servants of the king of Ashur have reviled me. See, I am putting a spirit upon him, and he shall hear a report and return to his own land, and I shall cause him to fall by the sword in his land. Okay? They couldn't have possibly known that. To them, the only way that that situation was going to work out was they didn't have food to survive. They had this huge army there that was telling them, come out or we're going to kill you. And if you come out, we're going to take you away and we're going to give you loads of great food and you're going to have a great life. To them, that situation was going to work out in only one way. Yehovah says, no, I'm going to send him back to his own land and he's going to die by the sword when he's in the land, which is something they couldn't have possibly known. But notice it says, don't be afraid of the words which you've heard, which the servants of the king of Ashur have reviled me. Those words and believing lies like that are words that revile Yehovah, that despise him, lightly esteem the words that he's spoken, which are words of truth. And the Rav Shukei returned and found the king of Ashur fighting against Livnah, for he had heard that he had left Lachish. And when the king heard concerning Tirhakah, king of Cush, he has come out to fight against you, he again sent messages to Chizkiyahu, saying, speak to Chizkiyahu, king of Yehudah, saying, do not let your Elohim in whom you trust deceive you, saying, Yerushalayim is not given into the hand of the king of Ashur. See, you have heard what the king of Ashur has done to all the lands by putting them under the ban. And are you going to be delivered? So again, when we're tested, these lies will come into our heads. Okay? Oh no, I can't do that. If I do that, it's going to be really bad. It would be bad in every other circumstance. Why am I the one that's going to be delivered from it? Isaiah's response to this was, therefore thus said Yehovah concerning the king of Ashur, he does not come into this city, nor does he shoot an arrow there, nor does he come before it with shield, nor does he build a siege mound against it. By the way that he came, by the same he turns back, and he does not come up into this city, declares Yehovah. I shall defend this city to save it for my own sake, and for the sake of David, my servant, for the sake of his name, and for the sake of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. It came to be in that night that the angel of Yehovah went out and smote in the camp of Ashur 185,000, and they rose up early in the morning and saw all of them dead bodies. They definitely couldn't have expected that. To them, there's a huge army. 185,000. They're just going to get crushed. That's definitely what's going to happen in that situation. Yehovah says, no, follow what I say. Follow the words that come from Yeshayahu, from Isaiah. And we're going to see how Yehovah actually interacts with reality. Is it all Yehovah brings things about through the play out of time and the things that he's set in motion? Or does he directly intervene in reality? Well, here, I think that everyone will agree, he directly intervened. He sent an angel to go and kill the entire army, or 185,000 of the army, significant number of them. We saw a couple of weeks ago something very similar, but with a different outcome, because Yehovah's perspective on what was happening was different. Okay, these were people that were in disobedience. Meanwhile, Pharaoh's army had set out from Mitzrayim, which is the same thing that we see in the account we just read. When the Chaldeans who were besieging Yerushalayim heard news of them, they withdrew from Yerushalayim. And the word of Yehovah came to Yirmiyahu the prophet. Yirmiyahu is another guy who's called sometimes Yirmiyah in the Hebrew, and sometimes Yirmiyahu, saying, thus said Yehovah, the Elohim of Yisrael, say this to the king of Yehudah who sent you to inquire of me. See, Pharaoh's army, which has come up to help you, shall turn back to Mitzrayim, to their own land. So they've come up, the army's gone away, but don't think that that's the end of it. The Chaldeans shall return and fight against this city and take it and burn it with fire. Thus said Yehovah, do not deceive yourselves, saying the Chaldeans shall go away from us, for they do not go. So we've got the opposite situation here. They think, from everything they can work out about the world, everything about the way that things should naturally follow, that the army's gone away and they're going to be okay. But Yehovah says, no, don't be deceived. For though you had smitten the entire army of the Chaldeans who were fighting against you, and there remained only wounded men among them, they would get up, each man in his tent, and burn the city with fire. So Yehovah is basically saying, my will be done. You don't get it, do you? The events that you see in your life are insignificant to me. Then these are not insurmountable odds as you view them. In this case, it's so certain that I'm going to come and smite this city in punishment for its defiance, that even if you were physically able to kill all of their army or smite all of their army, only the wounded people who are left would still come and burn down the city, because it's my will. Exodus 9:16 again says, and for this reason I've raised you up, in order to show you my power, and in order to declare my name in all the earth. Every single event which is happening in our lives, okay, we need to view it from Yehovah's perspective. We can't view it as, this is a terrible problem, what are we going to do? Jeremiah 23:7-8 says, therefore, see the days are coming, declares Yehovah, when they shall say no more, as Yehovah lives, who brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Mitzrayim, but as Yehovah lives, who brought up and led the seed of Israel out of the land of the north, and from all the lands where I had driven them, and they shall dwell on their own soil. So a fulfillment of this is when Yeshua comes back, and he gathers all of the people, and he takes them back to their land. And the people are no longer going to talk about Pharaoh. They're going to talk about that great deliverance. Isaiah 52:4-15, in the context of that, says, for thus said the Master Yehovah, at first my people went down into Mitzrayim to sojourn there, and Ashur oppressed them without cause. And now what have I here, declares Yehovah, that my people are taken away for naught? Those who rule over them make them wail. Okay, so their rulers who are over them are oppressing them, just like they were in Egypt. Okay, and just like perhaps our rulers will come to a point where they are making us wail and cry out to Yehovah. My name is despised all day continually. So they're oppressing his people, and we heard that they make laws against him and against his Mashiach. Therefore my people shall know my name in that day, for I, the one who is speaking, behold me. How pleasant upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, the gospel, who proclaims shalom, who brings good news, who proclaims deliverance, who says to Sion, your Elohim reigns. The voice of your watchmen, they have lifted up their voices. Together they shout for joy, because eye to eye they see in the return of Yehovah to Sion, which is what was prophesied there in Jeremiah 23. And we're going to look more at those prophecies when we get into the second part. But I want you to remember from this, the return of Yehovah to Sion and what it says about it. It says, break forth into joy, sing together, you waste places of Yerushalayim. For Yehovah has comforted his people, he has ransomed Yerushalayim. Yehovah has laid bare his set-apart arm in the eyes of the nations, and all the ends of the earth have seen the Yeshua of our Elohim. His set-apart arm is Yeshua. His deliverance is Yeshua. Okay, what does it say in the New Testament? That every eye shall see at his return. Turn aside, come out from there, touch not the unclean, come out of her midst, be clean, you who bear the vessels of Yehovah. For you do not come out in haste, nor go out in flight, for Yehovah is going before you, and the Elohim of Yisrael is gathering you. Okay, so unlike in the first Exodus, when they came out in haste, when Yehovah gathers them, they're not going to come out in haste. Okay, the possible other fulfillments of Passover when we will come out in haste. So this is why we prepare in that way. But when Yehovah gathers us, we do not come out in haste or go out in flight. See, my servant shall work wisely. He is high and has been lifted up and has been very high. As many were astonished at you, so marred from man his appearance, and form from the sons of men. So obviously we know it's talking of Yeshua. Now this is interesting. If you only hold on to one verse out of this, remember this. He does likewise sprinkle many nations. Concerning him, kings shut their mouths. For that which had not been recounted to them, they have seen. And what they had not heard, they have understood. So this is when Yeshua is revealed. And as I say, we'll be looking at this in more depth in the second part. But when he's revealed, kings are made silent. And they realize that there's a whole bunch of stuff that they were not made aware of. But now that they understand when they see it. Psalm 127, verses 1-2 says, if Yehovah does not build the house, its builders have labored in vain. Okay, so we know if we struggle to do things in our lives, and Yehovah is not the thing that's behind it, and we're not doing it to honor him, but we're doing it for another reason. We're doing it to get wealth for ourselves, or we're doing it for to get security or comfort for ourselves. If Yehovah is not in it, then it's been done in vain. If Yehovah does not guard the city, the watchman has stayed awake in vain. It says, in vain do you rise up early to sit up late, to eat the bread of toil, so he gives his beloved sleep. Okay, so he's basically saying, look, you can work towards all of those things, and you can try to create a life for yourself, but if Yehovah isn't behind it all, he's not the foundation that it's built on, it's all been in vain. He gives to his beloved sleep, he gives to them rest, because they can rest in him and know that he is the one who's going to provide for them as long as they're doing his will. And it was reported to the king of Mitzrayim that the people had fled. So back to the Torah portion. The heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people. And they said, why have we done this, that we've let Yisrael go from serving us? And this is interesting to me. I wrote an account of my life a few years ago, maybe like 8 years ago, because there was a lot of kind of weird stuff that was happening, and spiritual kind of understanding that I was coming to at the time. I remember one of the things that I wrote was that when you have some kind of revelation of something and you clearly grasp it, you clearly get to see whatever it is. Like for us, something happens in our life and we're like, wow, Yehovah really is behind everything. Everything's working out for good. I never knew that something like that could possibly happen, and now that it's happened, I see it so clearly, and that's how I will always proceed in my life. And it comes into sharp focus for us. But then afterwards, it's kind of like it's just taken a little bit from us. I said it was like taking three steps forward and then 2 back every time. You make a great advancement, but then some of it's lost, or the majority of it's lost. You don't really keep it in your mind. And that's what's happening to Pharaoh and his servants. They got to see who Yehovah was. And obviously they let Israel go after that point. But just a little bit afterwards, Yehovah's power in their lives had just kind of been taken from them. And they were like, what have we done? Why have we let them go from serving us? We need these people to build our cities. So he made this chariot ready and took his people with him. And he took 600 choice chariots and all the chariots of Mitzrayim with officers over all of them. And Yehovah hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim, and he pursued the children of Yisrael. But the children of Yisrael went out defiantly. So again, he sees the situation. He sees that they're trapped by the wilderness. The actual physical situation that's happening. He's like, why have we let them go? This is insanity. Why have we done what Yehovah said to do? This is going to be terrible for us. Revelation 20, 7-9, we see the same sort of thing happening. In this account of Moses with Pharaoh, Pharaoh is a picture of Hasatan. Pharaoh with Yosef, good Pharaoh, he was a picture of Yehovah. This Pharaoh is a picture of Hasatan. In Revelation 20 it says, and when the 1,000 years have ended, Hasatan shall be released from his prison. So Hasatan's just spent 1,000 years in prison because of what he's done. Okay, it was very, very bad, I imagine, for Hasatan for 1,000 years, just as it had just been for Pharaoh. Okay, he just had all the firstborn killed and all of the plagues which had just destroyed Egypt. What is the next thing that Hasatan does? Does he say, not going to mess with Yehovah again? No. He shall go out and lead the nations astray, which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together for battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. And they came up over the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the set-apart ones and the beloved city. Does it sound familiar to what is about to happen with Pharaoh coming after the children of Israel again? And Yehovah hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim. He pursued the children of Israel, but the children of Israel went out, what is translated here as defiantly. And I can't remember when it was that Charlie went over going out with a high hand. Okay, that's literally what the Hebrew says here. It's the same Hebrew that we'll see in Numbers 15 when we read it. But we can see the attitude that the children of Israel had here towards Pharaoh when they went out with a high hand against the things that he said is the same attitude that is being spoken of in Numbers 15. Numbers 15:29 says, "For him who does whatever by mistake, there is one Torah." Okay, some translations say ignorantly, but it's really not what this concept is talking about. It means in error, by mistake. So you can sin, and when you sin, you can be like, "Oh, I can't believe it. That's terrible." And you get back up and you go straight back on the path. That's sinning by mistake. It's not really sinning in ignorance. It's sinning in error. And then you get back up and you walk on the path again. Both for him who is native among the children of Israel and for the stranger who sojourns in their midst. And this is now contrasted with the attitude that they had when they went out from Pharaoh. But the soul who does whatever defiantly with a high hand, whether he is native or a stranger, he reviles Yehovah, and that soul shall be cut off from among his people. Because he's despised the word of Yehovah, he's broken his command, that soul shall certainly be cut off. His crookedness is upon him. So this is when we know Yehovah has given a command. And we have a choice then. Are we going to do the command or we're not going to do it? If we don't do it, what we're doing is despising his word. We're saying that is not what rules my life. In this situation, I rule my life. I'm going to make the decision. And to despise the word means to lightly esteem something. So obviously when you know that the word says to do something and you choose not to do it for whatever reason, that is to lightly esteem the word of Elohim. It's to say, yeah, the words of the Creator say to do this, but I actually want to do this. So I'm just going to lightly esteem that and highly esteem what I want to do. He's broken his commands. So this is how Yehovah sees our actions. We despise his word when we choose to do something that is not in his word. Very different from doing a sin by mistake or in error. Verse 9 of Exodus 14 says, "And the Mitzrites pursued them, and all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them camping by the sea, beside Pihahiroth, before Baal-Zephon. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes and saw the Mitzrites coming up after them. And they were greatly afraid, so the children of Israel cried out to Yehovah. And they said to Moshe, 'Did you take us away to die in the wilderness because there are no graves in Mitzrayim? What is this you have done to us to bring us up out of Mitzrayim? Is this not the word that we spoke to you in Mitzrayim, saying, leave us alone and let us serve the Mitzrites? For it would have been better for us to serve the Mitzrites than to die in the wilderness.'" Okay, and people have this attitude as well when it comes to, will I follow the word of Elohim? Basically what they say is, it would be better for us to serve the world, to serve Egypt, than it would for us to serve Yehovah. In this instance, it would be better for us to do that. I'm just going to check this, because if it's... No, it's not. I was going to say, if it's Ashley, there's something wrong with the recording. Again, it's a case of this. Sown on rocky places, they hear the word, they immediately receive it with joy. What's that? Yehovah's going to deliver us from Egypt? This is amazing. We were in slavery in Egypt. He's going to take us away to a land flowing with milk and honey. This is brilliant. And they go out. But then what happens? The army of Pharaoh come after them. They're confronted with something that is challenging in their life. And they're asked to follow the word of Yehovah and to trust in him. What happens? They have no root in themselves. They're short-lived. When pressure or persecution arises because of the word, immediately they stumble. And they don't stumble by mistake. They stumble defiantly and decide that they're going to govern their lives. It would be better for us to serve the Mitzrites than it would for us to serve Yehovah. Hebrews 11 shows us the attitude of the people who were saved by faith have. In belief or in faith, all these died, not having received the promises, but seeing them from a distance, welcomed and embraced them and confessed that they were aliens and strangers on the earth. For those who speak this way make it clear that they seek a fatherland. So for these people, it was like the disciples when all of the people left Yeshua, and Yeshua said, "Are you going to leave as well?" And they said, "Where would we go? You have the words of life." Okay, these people recognize that they're aliens and strangers on the earth. There's no choice to return to Mitzrayim. What are we going to do? We're going to go back to Egypt? Yeah, great. Those who speak in this way make it clear that they seek a fatherland. And yet, if they had indeed kept remembering the place from which they had come out, they would have had the chance to return. Now, the way that Yehovah has engineered this situation, where he was like, no, don't take them out by the way of the Philistines, otherwise they'll turn back. And the way that he's engineered this situation, where they've got an army coming after them, he's engineered it so that they actually can't turn back. But if the army hadn't been coming after them, and if they had gone through the land of the Philistines, maybe they would have turned back, and maybe they would have disobeyed Yehovah and said, no, it's easier for us to do this. For these people, and for us, keep remembering the place from which you came. If you turn back after having put your shoulder to the plow, they would have had the chance to return. But now they long for a better place that is a heavenly. Therefore, Elohim is not ashamed to be called their Elohim. And that is the attitude of people of faith. They haven't had the promises of Elohim, but that's what they're heading towards. And there's nothing that you could say to them that would be like, maybe you should do this, or maybe you should do that. Maybe you should disobey the word. It's like, well, return to Egypt. Like, abandon all of the promises of Yehovah. Those who speak in this way make it clear that they seek a fatherland, because that's where they're headed. They're not looking back and trying to work out stuff in the world. They've just put their focus on Yehovah. Moshe said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand still and see the Yeshua of Yehovah, which he does for you today. For the Mitzrites whom you see today, you are never, never to see again. Yehovah does fight for you, and you keep still. Okay, and this is how we are when something comes up, a test comes up, and we're like, Christine, you've had the test, haven't you, of will you work on Shabbat? Well, all that we're required to do is we follow the word, and we say, no, I won't work on Shabbat. That would be insane. We keep quiet, and Yehovah fights for us in that situation. And we don't know how he's going to work those situations out. We don't know what he's going to do. But what we're going to look at up until the end of this, we're going to look at how he actually works in reality, so that we can understand in our lives that we don't need to work these things out. We just let Yehovah fight for us. Yehovah said to Moshe, why do you cry to me? Speak to the children of Israel and let them go forward. And you lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. So note here what he wants him to do. He says to Moshe, lift up your rod, stretch out your hand and divide the sea. Okay, he wants him to do something that can be seen by others. And let the children of Israel go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I am hardening the hearts of the Mitzrites, and they shall follow them. And I am to be esteemed through Pharaoh and over all his army, his chariots and his horsemen. So when he asks us to do something, okay, we do what he's told us to do, like Moshe did. And then we let him do the rest. He can give us favor in the eyes of other people. He can harden their hearts towards something. He can make things work out in their lives in a certain way that makes them deal with us in a certain way. He can do whatever he wants. The Mitzrites shall know that I am Yehovah when I am esteemed through Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen. Matthew 13 verse 15 says, for the heart of this people has become thickened, it's become hardened. What does he say? I'm going to harden the heart of Pharaoh and of his army. And they're going to follow the Mitzrites, aren't they, into the sea. The Israelites. And their ears are hard of hearing, their eyes they've closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their heart and turn back, and I heal them. So for these people, Yehovah doesn't want them to understand and to turn back so that he heals them. Because he wants their hearts to be hardened in what they want. He's not doing this arbitrarily. These are people who have not chosen him. Just as Pharaoh had chosen to go his own way and he had his own desires, he never wanted to obey Yehovah. These people are destined for destruction, just like the Egyptians are destined to destruction. So he says, I'll harden their hearts, okay, and they're going to pursue you. The angel of Elohim who went before the camp of Yisrael moved and went behind them. So the angel was going in front of them, it moved and went behind them. The column of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. Psalm 34 says the same happens with us. The angel of Yehovah encamps all around those who fear him and rescues them. Oh, taste and see that Yehovah is good. Blessed is the man that takes refuge in him. The ones who had taken refuge in him were Joshua, Caleb, Moshe, possibly Aharon. Okay, and the people who were around them were inheriting their blessings in that moment, if you like. Psalm 139 verse 5 says, you've closed me in behind and before. And as we read, it's the angel of Yehovah. And came between the camp of the Mitzrites and the camp of Yisrael, and it was the cloud and the darkness, and it gave light by day, gave light by night, and the one did not come near the other all the night. Okay, and what we've got here is a picture of the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. Giving thanks to the Father who's made us fit to share in the inheritance of the set-apart ones in the light. The set-apart ones in the light, you've got the camp of Israel, who has delivered us from the authority of darkness, Pharaoh, the camp of the Egyptians, and transferred us into the kingdom of the Son of his love. That's what we have pictured here. I'd love to go more into detail about these two kingdoms because there's so much amazing stuff to know about them, but people can just search this on YouTube. I'd recommend this teaching. Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea, and Yehovah caused the sea to go back. So he says, stretch out your hand, as if it's going to be Moses that parts the sea. But Yehovah parts the sea. So why does he tell Moses to stretch out his hand? We'll look at that later on. By a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. This is very specifically phrased in this way. It's exactly what the Hebrew says. He made the sea into dry land. Now we know what he actually did in this case, is he parted the sea and they walked through on the dry land. This is written in a particular way, and I'll reveal more about that when we get into the second part. But it's phrased like this to be prophetic. The children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on the right and on their left. The water of the word, so that you don't turn to the right, to the left. The Mitzrites pursued and went after them into the midst of the sea. All the horses of Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. Revelation 13, 1-2. Remember, Pharaoh is a picture of Hasatan. Hasatan also has an army. Hasatan also has a kingdom according to Scripture. And I stood on the sand of the sea. I saw a great beast coming out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads names of blasphemy. And the beast I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and his authority. The dragon is Hasatan, and he gives to the beast, who is a spiritual entity, he gives him his power, his throne, and his authority. Okay, he's a dominion. Okay, like the other beasts that we see in Scripture. And again, I'd love to go into all of that. But if people are interested in what beasts and horns are actually defined by Scripture, check out this teaching. It came to be in the morning watch that Yehovah looked down upon the army of the Mitzrites through the column of fire and cloud. He brought the army of Mitzrites into confusion. He took off their chariot wheels so that they drove them with difficulty, and the Mitzrites said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for Yehovah fights for them against the Mitzrites. Okay, so now at this point, they understand. This is what Matthew 13 was talking about, that Yehovah does not want people to understand so that they turn and they get healed. He wants people to understand who he is through his word and turn back and do his commandments because they read it and they love it. They love who he is and they want to do them. Just as with the Egyptians, those people are going to find out too late when they're about to be destroyed. When they're about to be destroyed, they will find out that their hearts have been hard to Yehovah. But look how Yehovah interacts with reality here. He put the Egyptians into confusion. Now, no one amongst the Israelites would have known that Yehovah could put people into confusion, that he could make them, give favor to people like they saw when they came out of Egypt, or that he could confuse their enemies and make them fight against each other. He also took off their chariot wheels So he directly interacted with them, and he came and did something real and specific in reality. So he can do that for us too. And we don't know what he's going to do. This is why we need to trust him. 1 Samuel 14, verse 20 says, and Shaul was called, this is King Saul, and all the people who were with him. And they went into battle, and see, every man's sword was against his neighbor, a very great confusion. This is something that YHVH does often throughout Scripture. Okay, so they went into battle, but they would have been defeated, and all of the enemy were fighting against each other. The Hebrews who were with the Philistines before that time, who went up with them into the camp, turned round, they too, to be with Israel who were with Shaul and Jehonathan. And all the men of Israel who had hidden in the mountains of Ephraim heard that the Philistines had fled, and they also pursued them in battle. So it was so bad they'd all gone off to hide. And then they heard what had happened, what YHVH had done, and then they come out and they pursue them. Thus YHVH saved Israel that day, and the battle passed over to Beth Aven. So we're going to look at a number of these things, and we'll come to an end of the first part. Judges 7:22 says, and the 300 blew the shofarot, which is the Hebrew plural of shofar. So this is Gideon when YHVH says, no, don't go with all of those men. Otherwise, the men will think that it was because you had great numbers that you won the battle. Rather, take the 300 of them that lap water by the river. And it says, YHVH set the sword of each one against each other throughout all the camp. So all they did, they would have been like, well, we're going into battle. We've got our trumpets. We're probably going to get killed, aren't we? Look at this huge army that's in front of us. They went and they blew the trumpets, and then all of the enemy started killing each other. They could have never known that that was how YHVH was going to work things out. Habakkuk 3:11-14 says, sun, moon, stand still in their places, which is another interesting one. Okay, in Joshua, we see the sun and the moon standing still. And people say, well, that was just from people's perspective. These are the words of the prophet Habakkuk. Sun and moon stand still in their places. Not the earth stands still and stops rotating. The sun and the moon stand still. Like light, your arrows fly. Like lightning, your glittering spear. You step through the earth in rage. You thresh the nations in wrath. You shall go forth to save your people, to save your anointed. Okay, to save your Mashiach. You shall smite the head from the house of the wicked by laying bare from foundation to neck, Salah. You shall pierce with his own arrows the head of his leaders. So again, when we're in situations and we go in and we think, how is this possibly going to work out? How is YHVH going to work this out for me? I'll use you as an example again. Okay, how's it going to work out when I go in and meet with these people and say I'm not going to work on the Shabbat? Well, YHVH can turn them against each other. He can give you favor in their eyes. He can work out whatever situation he wants. He can make something physical happen in reality if that's going to be what's needed to fulfill his will. But his word is true, and he promises that you can stand on that truth. And you can walk into that situation, and he will be with you. 2 Chronicles 20:5-12 says, and Yehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Yehudah and Yerushalayim in the house of YHVH in front of the new courtyard, and said, O YHVH, Elohim of our fathers, are you not Elohim in the heavens? And do you not rule over all the kingdoms of the nations? And in your hand is there not power and might, so that no one is able to stand against you? We can look at the kingdoms of the world and we can say, we've got no chance against all of these world systems. But they're all in YHVH's hands. Are you not our Elohim? You have driven out the inhabitants of this land before your people Yisrael, and gave it to the seed of Abraham, your friend, forever. And they dwell in it and have built you a set-apart place in it for your name, saying, if evil does come upon us, such as the sword, judgment, or pestilence, or scarcity of food, we shall stand before this house and in your presence. For your name is in this house, and cry out to you in our distress, and you do hear and save. And now see the children of Ammon and Moab and Mount Seir, who you would not let Yisrael invade when they came out of the land of Mitzrayim, for they turned from them and did not destroy them. So now they were confronted with these armies, the armies of Moab, the armies of the Ammonites, and the armies of the Edomites. All of them were against them at this point. I love this prayer. It's a very honest prayer. It says, and see, they are repaying us by coming in to drive us out of your possession, which you have given us to inherit. O our Elohim, would you not judge them? We are powerless against this great army that is coming against us, and we do not know what to do, but our eyes are upon you. I do like that prayer. We're doing what you've said to do. We know that everything is in your power. We don't know what to do. Please help us. In 2 Chronicles 23 to 25, a little bit after this, this is the result. It says, then the children of Ammon and Moab stood up against the inhabitants of Mount Seir to destroy and annihilate them. So two of the armies come against the other one to destroy them. And when they'd made an end of the inhabitants of Seir, they helped to destroy one another. And when Yehudah came at the lookout in the wilderness, they looked towards the army and saw their dead bodies lying on the ground, and none had escaped. And Jehoshaphat and his people came to take away their spoil. And they found among them a great amount of valuables on the dead bodies and precious jewelry which they'd stripped off for themselves, more than they could take away. And they were 3 days plundering the spoil, for it was much. So what they did, they were faced with that situation. They went into the situation and they just prayed and said, we don't know what to do. We're standing on your word. Then the situation resolves itself. The three invading armies destroy themselves and leave all of this great wealth for them to take afterwards. Isaiah 19, 1-2 says, the message concerning Mitzrayim. See, Yehovah is riding on a swift cloud, and he shall come into Mitzrayim, and the idols of Mitzrayim shall tremble at his presence, and the heart of Mitzrayim melt in its midst. And I shall stir up Mitzrites against Mitzrites, and they shall fight, each one against his brother, each one against his neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. He does this throughout his word. He brings people into confusion, and he has them fight against each other. And when he needs to, he steps in and intervenes directly. Judges 9, 22-24, and Avimelech governed Yisrael 3 years. And Elohim sent an evil spirit between Avimelech and the masters of Shechem. And the masters of Shechem acted treacherously against Avimelech, in order that the violence done to the 70 sons of Yerubbaal might come and their blood be on Avimelech, their brother, who killed them, and on the masters of Shechem, who strengthened his hands to kill his brothers. So even if he needs to, he can send an evil spirit to do his bidding. We've seen in 2 Kings 20 before, when the evil spirit comes up before Yehovah in the throne room and says, send me, I'll deceive them. Yehovah can even do that. He creates light and he creates darkness. He brings all of these things and uses them for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So you don't know in your lives how things are going to work out. Exodus 23, 27-28. I shall send my fear before you. This is just as they're about to enter into the land, or they were supposed to be just about to enter into the land anyway. I shall send my fear before you and cause confusion among all the people to whom you come, and make your enemies turn their backs on you. One thing you're not expecting when you're going out to fight an army is for the enemy to turn around and show their back to you. He sends his fear before them. He causes confusion among them. And also, if he wants to directly intervene, he'll directly intervene. I shall send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivite and the Canaanite and the Hittite from before you. So I'll directly influence things. I'll chase them out with physical things in this world. So we don't have to worry about anything, apart from standing and making sure that Yehovah is the foundation upon which all of our works and all of our life is built. We'll come back in the second part and we'll look at something particularly fascinating. We're up to verse 26. Let's see what else is saying. Okay, we're live. Okay, so then Yehovah said to Moshe, stretch out your hand over the sea and let the waters come back on the Mitzrites, on their chariots and on their horsemen. And Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its usual flow at the break of day, with the Mitzrites fleeing into it. Thus Yehovah overthrew the Mitzrites in the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. And not even one of them was left. Okay, so I have very subtly drawn your attention here to a repeating theme which is throughout this passage of Scripture. Can anyone see what it is? Okay, the sea is mentioned. This is an incredibly, I don't know, it was just amazing. I remember when YHVH began to show me this when I was doing the life after death teachings. And he's just shown me more and more about it this week. So I'll go through it with you. Well, we've got what we would think of as the sea, okay? And that is what we think of as the ocean. The oceans that are on the earth are not the only sea which is mentioned in Scripture. Okay, we also have what is called the deep. The deep is mentioned in Scripture, isn't it? And that is under the earth. We've got the heavens and we've got the earth, and then we've got Sheol under the earth. And where Sheol is a place called the deep. In the flood of Noah, it says that he opened the fountains of the deep, that some of the water came from the fountains of the deep. He opened the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven. And we hear a lot about the deep, and we're going to look at it. But that is another sea. And it turns out that in the end, it's going to be a very interesting place that we are all familiar with, at least the concept of, and that is the lake of fire. So let's get into it. Luke 8:26-33. They sailed to the country of the Gadarenes, which is opposite Galilee. And as he went out onto the land, he was met by a certain man from the city who had demons for a long time. He wore no garments, and he was not living in a house, but in the tombs. And when he saw Yeshua, he cried out, fell down before him, and with a loud voice said, "What have I to do with you, Yeshua, Son of the Most High Elohim? I beg you, do not torment me." So something I want you to hold on to out of this is that he asked him not to torment him. When he's talking about tormenting him, he's not talking about physically torturing him. It's mental torment, which is discussed here. For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man, for it had seized him many times, and he was bound with chains and shackles, being guarded, and breaking the bonds, he was driven by the demon into the lonely places. And Yeshua asked him, saying, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," because many demons had entered into him. And they were begging him that he would not command them to go out into the abyss. Okay, in Greek, the abyss is Tain Abysson. Okay, well, it's Tain Abuson, from the Greek word abysson. So these demons don't want Yeshua to cast them out of the man into this place that is called the abyss. So let's see what else we can find out about this place called the abyss throughout Scripture. In Revelation 9:1-2, it says, "And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star from the heaven which had fallen to the earth, and the key to the bottomless pit was given to it." We think, the bottomless pit, okay. Bottomless pit, that's different to the abyss, isn't it? Well, is it? In Greek, it says phria, which is the Greek word for pit. And then it says tes abyssou, okay? Tes abyssou, which is the same word, just a modified version of the Greek word abysson, like the other one that we saw for the abysses. It's referring to the abyss. It says pit, the abyss. What the abyss actually should literally be translated as is the bottomless. Okay, so when it says, "Do not cast us out into the abyss," what they're asking is, do not cast us out into the bottomless. Here, we just have another noun used. It's the bottomless pit, or pit the bottomless. Pit the bottomless is what it literally says. So don't cast us into the bottomless. This is talking about the bottomless pit. It says, "And he opened pit the bottomless, and smoke went up out of the pit, like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun was darkened, also the air, because of the smoke of the pit." Okay, and this is the same abyss which was referred to by the demons to not cast us into there. In Revelation 21:3, we see it used again. I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. And he seized the dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he threw him into pit the bottomless, shut him up, set a seal on him so that he should no more lead the nations astray until the 1,000 years were ended. Okay, now what I want to do is show you this verse in the ISR. In the ISR version of the scriptures, this is what it says. I saw an angel coming down from the heaven, having the key to the pit of the deep. That is more accurately what it says. It could say the pit of the bottomless. As we saw in Greek, it's pit, the bottomless, and the word of is implied there. So why is it translating it as pit of the deep? Why is it the deep? He seized the dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, bound him for 1,000 years, and he threw him into the pit of the deep. So every time the bottomless pit is used in some translations, pit of the deep is used in the ISR translation. And as I say, it's a more accurate translation. Pit of the bottomless, possibly. Well, pit of the deep. So why is it saying pit of the deep? Why is it translating Tain Abison as the deep? Well, if we look in the Septuagint version, okay, we look at Genesis 1 verse 2. It says, the earth was unsightly and unfurnished, and darkness was over the deep. That's what it says in the English, but in the Greek, again, it uses that word, Tain Abison, the abyss. Darkness was over the face of the abyss. So when he created the heavens and the earth, he also created the abyss, and darkness was over the face of the abyss, or the bottomless. Same thing. Romans 10:6-7 says, but the righteousness of belief speaks in this way. Do not say in your heart, who shall ascend into the heavens, that is to bring Messiah down, or who shall descend into the abyss, Tain Abison, that is to bring Messiah up from the dead. Okay, now it's interesting, because we're talking about the sea, aren't we? Paul here is actually quoting from a Hebrew passage. He's quoting from Deuteronomy 30. And in Deuteronomy 30, it doesn't say the deep or the abyss or anything like that. It says it's not in the heavens to say who shall ascend into the heavens for us and bring it to us and cause us to hear it so that we do it, nor is it beyond the sea. So where the Greek translates the Hebrew the sea, it says the abyss or the deep. Because he's not talking about who will go down to the bottom of the sea on earth. He's saying who will go into heavens, the highest you can go. Who will go into the abyss, the lowest that you can go. And interestingly, in the Aramaic, it says, or who descends to the abyss of Sheol, tells us where it is, and brings up Mashiach again from the house of the dead. Sheol is the house of the dead, and the abyss is in Sheol. Sheol is on the sides of the abyss, as we'll see. In Revelation 11, verse 7, we get something else that links the bottomless pit, the bottomless, the deep, all these things with the sea. It says, and when they have ended their witness, the beast coming up out of the bottomless pit, right there, the beast coming up out of the bottomless pit. There's only two beasts mentioned in Revelation. One of them comes from the earth. The other one comes up out of the sea. So you see the sea and the bottomless pit are connected here. Again in Revelation 17:8, it says the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come up out of the bottomless pit. There's only one beast coming up, and it comes up out of what is called the sea. So we've got the pit, the bottomless, the abyss, the deep, the sea. These are all terms for the same thing, and they're all used interchangeably, as we can see throughout Scripture. Psalm 146 verse 6 says, maker of the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that in them is. Okay? Not talking about the sea on the earth, because that's part of the earth. That's one of the oceans on the earth. He's maker of the highest thing, the heavens, the earth, and the sea, the lowest thing. Matthew 12:43 says something very interesting. Now, if you remember in the creation narrative, you know that the firmament, hierarchia, Okay? That separates the waters above from the waters below. What is above the firmament is the heavens. So the realm of the heavens is in water. And there is this link throughout Scripture of the spiritual realm and water. In heaven, it's water. The whole realm is in water. In the demons that didn't want to get cast out, they didn't want to go into the abyss, which is the sea, where there is water. Okay, and in Matthew 12:43, and this is in the Aramaic, I didn't label it as such, but it is. It says, now when an unclean spirit goes out from a man, it wanders in places that have no water in them. So when you cast a spirit out of somebody, it says dry places in the Greek. The Aramaic, it specifies that there's no water in them, and that's what it is literally written there. So it seems that spirits like to dwell in water. And we've got the abyss where they don't want to be sent, that's water. Heaven, that's water. And in people, what are we made up? The majority of what we're made up from is water, of course. So when you cast out a spirit, it wanders around in places that have no water in them. Revelation 21 verse 1 says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the former heaven and the former earth have passed away, and the sea is no more. If this was talking about the ocean, then it would be part of the earth, wouldn't it? New heavens, new earth. And it says the sea is no more. He's maker of the heavens, the earth, and the sea. The sea is no more. So what is no more in the new heavens and the new earth? The bottomless pit, the deep, the abyss. That's what is no more. Genesis 1 verse 2 in the Hebrew says, and the earth came to be formless and empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And in the Hebrew, it's ha-tehom. Tehom being deep, ha meaning the. So ha-tehom. Where else do we see this? Proverbs 8:22-24, Yahovah possessed me, the beginning of his way as his first of his works of old. The first of Yahovah's works was to bring wisdom forth. Obviously, no time, no space, there's just Yahovah. The first thing he brings about is his wisdom in a manifest form. I was set up ages ago at the first, before the earth ever was, when there were no depths, when there was no tehom, when the deep, the pit, the abyss wasn't there. Because what does it say is first, darkness was on the face of the abyss after he makes the heavens and the earth. So before the earth ever was, and before the deep was there, I was brought forth. Job 28:13-14 says, man does not know its value, or his value. Its and his are the same in Hebrew. And it is not found in the land of the living. Okay, so we're going to hear about something that's not in the land of the living. The land of the living is everything that happens underneath the sun. Sheol is not under the sun, as we find out from Ecclesiastes, which is why people get confused about verses about people not knowing anything in Sheol, and not knowing anything about what is done under the sun, which does not include Sheol. So it's not found in the land of the living. Ha-tehom has said, it is not in me, and the sea has said, it is not with me. This is what you call a Hebrew parallelism. That's where you say two things that are the same thing, and it emphasizes what is being said. So the deep says it's not in me, the sea says it's not with me. Okay, it's the same thing said in two different ways. The deep and the sea, of course, being linked. And it's not found in the land of the living, which these are not in. Job 38:16-17 says, have you come to the sources of the sea? Or have you walked about in the recesses of the deep, ha-tehom, what the darkness was on the face of? Okay, so the sea and the deep linked here as well. Now we've got some very interesting phrasing used. It says, were the gates of death revealed to you? Or have you seen the gates of the shadow of death? All of these things are talking about the same thing, the sources of the sea. Now, as we'll see, the sea has got gates on it. It's got bars and it's got doors on it. Have you seen the gates of the shadow of death? It's an interesting phrase, the shadow of death. Okay. If we look at Psalm 88:1-6 in the Hebrew, first of all, it says, oh, Yahovah, Elohim of my deliverance, Elohim of my Yeshua. By day I have cried out, in the night also before you. Let my prayer come before you. Incline your ear to my cry. For my soul is filled with evils, and my life draws near to Sheol. Okay, so we're talking about things that happen to do with Sheol. I have been reckoned among those who go down to the pit. So in Sheol, you've got two groups of people. You've got those with Abraham, and you've got those on the side of Sheol that are going to go to destruction. And going to destruction is to go down to the pit, scripturally speaking. I have become like a man who has no strength, released among the dead, like slain ones lying in the grave, whom you have remembered no more, and who have been cut off from your hand. You have put me in the lowest pit, in dark places, in Hatehom. In the Hebrew, it says in Hatehom. The rest of this is the same in the Greek. But when you come to verse 6, it says, they laid me in the lowest place, in dark places, in the shadow of death. What did we read in Job 38? Have you come to the gates of the shadow of death? Okay? The shadow of death is used, but instead, in the Hebrew, you've got the depths. There's the connection there between the two. So have you come to the sources of the sea, walked in the recesses of Hatehom, where the gates of death revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of the shadow of death? This is all to do with the deep, it's all to do with the sea. Earlier in Job 38, it says, or who enclosed the sea with doors? Is the ocean enclosed with doors? Anyone seen the doors of the ocean? No, it's talking about the deep. When it burst forth and came from the womb, when I made the clouds its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band. What did we hear in Genesis 1:2? Darkness was on the face of the deep. Darkness was the thick swaddling band on the sea, which is enclosed with doors. And assigned for it my law, and set bars and doors. Okay, so this deep, the pit, the bottomless, the abyss, the sea, has bars and doors on it. Which makes sense when we read that we saw an angel coming down from heaven having the key to the bottomless pit. Okay, if it's got gates and bars and doors on them, then a key would make sense. Previously, it's just like, well, what's the key to the bottomless pit? It's a bit weird. Great chain in his hand. He seized the dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, bound him for 1,000 years, and he threw him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal on him. Okay, so now all of this starts to make sense, doesn't it? Revelation 20:12-14. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from what was written in the books according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Do you think this is all the mariners who've died at sea? It's probably not, is it? Death and Sheol gave up the dead who were in them. So you've got death and Sheol giving up the dead, and the sea giving up the dead that are in it. Interesting that there are dead in the sea at the time, and we'll come on to that as we go on. And they were judged, each one according to his works, and the death and Sheol were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death. So death and Sheol are thrown into the lake of fire. Why isn't the sea thrown into the lake of fire? Well, the sea, as it turns out, ends up being the lake of fire. Okay, we have all these parallels drawn throughout Scripture of water being the first judgment and then fire being the later judgment. The sea, at the moment, is water. The sea will be fire. So you've got the dead coming from the sea, you've got the dead coming from death and Sheol, and then you've got death and Sheol being thrown into the sea, which is the lake of fire, and the dead, after having been judged, will be thrown into the lake of fire too. 2 Peter 3:5-7, for they choose to have this hidden from them, that the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of water and in the water by the word of Elohim, through which the world at that time was destroyed. Destruction coming by water, being flooded with water. And the present heavens and the earth are treasured up by the same word, okay, the word which is the underlying foundation of all events, being kept for fire, for a day of judgment and destruction. So first the destruction is by water, future it will be by fire, and it's the same with the sea. Mark 5:13 also gives us An interesting parallel between the sea and the lake of fire. Okay, this is the same story of Yeshua coming across this guy with demons and him casting the demons out of them, and they go into the pigs, don't they? And it says he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. They were about 2,000, and the herd rushed down the steep place into the sea and drowned in the sea. So you've got the unclean spirits being destroyed in the sea here. Interesting, it uses the Greek word, the sea. In Luke 8:31-33, it says they were begging him that he would not command them to go out into the abyss. That's the one under the earth. And a herd of many pigs was feeding there on the mountain. They begged him to allow them to go into them, and he allowed them. And the demons, having gone out of the man, entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down to the steep place into the lake and drowned. Same word that's used for the lake of fire. So we've got the sea and the lake being contrasted in the two gospel accounts. Job 33:24 says, then he shows favor to him and says, release him from going down to the pit. I have found a ransom. So this is important. Our ransom is Yeshua. We are freed from under the power of death. Okay, the power of death is the second death in Sheol, and it's in the hands of Hasatan. And it's when we go down into the sea that we are consumed by the fire. And it's interesting, we'll get to Jonah later on, but Jonah calls the sea the stomach of Sheol, where the dead are consumed. We're ransomed from under the power of death, which is in the hands of Hasatan. And this is what is prophetically spoken of here. Release him from going down to the pit, to the sea, to the abyss, to the bottomless, to the stomach of Sheol. I have found a ransom, which is Yeshua. Isaiah 51:10-11 says, was it not you who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, who made the depths of the sea a way for the redeemed to pass over? This is how it is spoken of in our story with the Exodus. Okay, he let the ones he'd redeemed from Egypt pass over the sea. This is talking about when he dried up the sea and the redeemed passed over. It's talking about historical Exodus. The next verse is talking about the future. It says, let the ransomed of YHVH return, those who have been ransomed so that they don't go down into the pit. They shall come to Sion with singing and everlasting joy on their heads. Let them attain joy and gladness, sorrow and sighing shall flee away. So hold on to the fact that when the ransomed of YHVH, hopefully us, return, we will go to Sion. We will go to Zion. Okay? Isaiah 35:8-10 talks of this same event. It says, there shall be a highway and a way, and it shall be called the way of set apartness, the way of holiness. The unclean does not pass over it, but it is for those who walk the way, and no fools wander on it. No lion is there, nor any ravenous beast go upon it. It is not found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. The ransomed of YHVH shall return and enter Sion with singing, with everlasting joy on their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Same language that's used. This is when a way is made for the ransomed who will not go down to the pit to pass over. Yeshua describes Sheol for us, and we'll get onto that. Psalm 68 verse 22 says, YHVH said, I bring back from Bashan, I bring back from the depths the sea. This is where he brings back from. Okay, this is where we are going to be brought back from as the ransomed of YHVH who do not go down into the pit. Luke 16:19-26 says, but there was a certain rich man who used to dress in purple and fine linen and live luxuriously every day. And there was a certain beggar named Eleazar, being covered with sores, who was placed at his gate, and longing to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Indeed, even the dogs came and licked his sores. And it came to be that the beggar, Lazarus, died and was carried by the angels to the bosom of Abraham. Some translations say Abraham's bosom, and everyone thinks that this place is called Abraham's bosom. It just means he was carried to where Abraham was, with Abraham. Interestingly, he's carried by the angels there. We know, and we've looked at before, that the trees of Eden are in Sheol. the paradise of God is in Sheol. Yeshua said, today you will be with me in paradise, which is in Sheol, which is where he went and spent 3 days in the heart of the earth. Okay? What do we know about the Garden of Eden after man was kicked out of it? There are angels guarding it. It's interesting that when you get taken to paradise, when you die, the beggar died and he was carried by the angels. The rich man that also died and was buried. And while being in torment, there's that word again, the same word. When the demons said, do not torment me, Yeshua, they weren't saying, oh, don't get your torture instruments out. They were talking about mental torment. And that's exactly what's being spoken of here. You can imagine being on the side of Sheol where you know your end is to end up in the pit. It would torment you, which is exactly what it's talking about. Having lifted up his eyes, he saw Abraham far away and Eleazar in his bosom. And crying out, he said, Father Abraham, have compassion on me. Send Eleazar to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented by this flame. Not in this flame. The word in and by are the same word in Greek. It's a mistranslation to be tormented in the flame. He's tormented by the flame. It says cool in the Greek, and it unequivocally says cool. But in the Aramaic, it says moisten. Moisten my tongue with water. So I don't know which one's right. Could be the Greek is right. What we do know, as we've looked at, is that the dead who are not those who go down to the pit are comforted in Sheol with water. That's what it says in Ezekiel. The ones who go down to the pit, they are not comforted. And this is what Abraham says. But Abraham said, Son, remember that in your life you received the good, and likewise Eleazar the evil. But now he is comforted with water, and you are tormented. And this guy either wants him to cool or moisten his tongue with water. I would suggest that moisten is more in line with what we know doctrinally, but it could well be cool. Besides all this, between us and you, a great chasm has been set. In Greek, chasma. Okay, and it doesn't mean necessarily an expanse of an open space. It's only used once in the Greek New Testament. It can mean a space that is filled with water as well. It's an expanse, basically, a great expanse. So you've got the two sides of Sheol, and in between is this great expanse. And this great expanse is the sea or the deep, which is spoken of. So that those who wish to pass from here to you are unable, nor do those from there pass to us. Now, if you remember before, it said that the dead that were in the sea, the sea gave up the dead that were in it. Yeah? So there are dead that are in the sea at Yeshua's coming, or after the 1,000 years when people are judged by their works. So that those who wish to pass from here to you are unable. They're unable to pass over. So we've got the two sides of Sheol. We've got the pit, the sea, the deep, in the middle. Isaiah 14:15 says, you're brought down to Sheol. It tells us where it is, the sides of the pit. This is the great expanse which is between the two sides. Proverbs 27 verse 1, I'm going to suggest is the reason why people are unable to cross over and why there are dead in the sea. In that day, YHVH with his severe sword, great and strong, punishes Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, that twisted serpent. He shall slay the monster that is in the sea. Is that a monster in the ocean? No. It's the sea under the earth. That's where Leviathan is. And we find out something very interesting about Leviathan. In Amos 9:3 it says, and if they hide themselves on top of Carmel, from there I shall search and take them. And if they hide from before my eyes at the bottom of the sea, from there I shall command the serpent, and it shall bite them. So this serpent can be commanded by YHVH, and that's going to be interesting when we get into the book of Jonah. Possibly it might be in the next part. Okay, but he'll command the serpent. If people go into the sea, YHVH can command the serpent and it bites them. So people are unable to cross from one side to the other. And there are dead that are in the sea, perhaps people who tried to make the journey. So back to the Parsha, it says, then YHVH said to Moshe, stretch out your hands over the sea and let the waters come back on the Mitzrites, the Egyptians, those people of the world. on their chariots and on their horsemen. And Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its usual flow at the break of day. Remember, a way is going to be made for us, the redeemed, to pass over. And it's paralleled with when YHVH brought the Israelites out of Egypt. He made the sea into dry land. That's what it says, although we know that he didn't do that. It's prophetic of what happens with the sea that is in Sheol, when a way is made for us to pass over as the ransomed of YHVH. Return to its usual flow at the break of day, with the Mitzrites fleeing into it. Thus YHVH overthrew the Mitzrites in the midst of the sea. Now, I do wonder whether when the Mitzrites, those on the other side of Sheol, are watching those in Abraham's bosom cross over the sea and it becomes dry land, and they go from Sheol, whether or not they then rush into the sea as if they're going to be delivered in the same way, and the sea is returned to its usual flow. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them, and not even one was left of them. In Revelation 19:20, it says, "The beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence." Remember, the beast was given his throne and his authority as a part of Hasatan's kingdom by the dragon, who is Hasatan, who worked signs in his presence, by which he also led astray those who received the mark of the beast, those who worshipped his image. The two were thrown alive into the lake of fire, burning with sulfur. So we do have Pharaoh and his army cast into the lake of fire. The children of Israel walked on dry ground in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall to them on their right and on their left. Thus YHVH saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Mitzrites, and Israel saw the Mitzrites dead on the seashore. Which is interesting, because we are told that we have received salvation, which is to be cleansed of our sins. At that point, we're washed clean of our sins, and we're given garments of salvation, robes of righteousness to wear, which we can defile. Peter says that from that point onwards, our faith is tested, worth more than gold, because when we're tested, we're not refined by literal fire, we're refined by these trials, so that our faith may be found worthy of him for that salvation which is to be revealed when he is revealed. There is a salvation which happens when Yeshua is revealed, if we have not defiled our garments when we get to that point. Thus YHVH saved Israel that day when they crossed over the sea. That's the salvation that we look forward to when we receive our incorruptible bodies. And Israel saw the great work which YHVH had done in Mitzrayim, and the people feared YHVH and believed YHVH and his servant Moshe. Can you imagine the scene in Sheol? When, if we die before he comes, we'll have been living in Sheol until he comes. And suddenly there's a way made for us to pass over this great chasm, and to come out of Sheol as the redeemed of YHVH. Can you imagine what the scene's going to be like for us, and how thankful we're going to be in that day, and how jubilant and amazed we're going to be in that day? Then Moshe and the children of Israel sang this song to YHVH, and spoke, saying, "I sing to YHVH, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he's thrown into the sea. Yah is my strength and my song, and has become my Yeshua. He is my ale, and I praise him, Elohim of my father, and I exalt him. YHVH is a man of battle. YHVH is his name. He has cast Pharaoh's chariots and his army into the sea, and his chosen officers are drowned in the sea of reeds. Hatehom covered them, the deep again." Okay, so it starts to use language suggestive of the fact that it's not just talking about this event which happens then. "They went down to the bottom like a stone. Your right hand, O YHVH, has become great in power. Your right hand, O YHVH, has crushed the enemy." Who's his right hand? It's Yeshua. What does Genesis tell us will happen when Hasatan bruises Yeshua's heel? He will crush the enemy, Hasatan. Jonah 2. Yonah prayed to Yehovah, his Elohim, from the stomach of the fish. So make no mistake, when he's doing this, he is at the bottom of the ocean on the earth. He said, I called to Yehovah because of my distress, and he answered me. From the stomach of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. Where is he? He's in the sea. We are consumed in Sheol. Psalm 49 says, death will feed upon them. Okay, metaphorical language. Consumed in the stomach of Sheol. From the stomach of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. Where is he? He's in the stomach of the fish at the bottom of the sea. For you threw me into Hatehom, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your breakers and your waves passed over me. So I said, I have been driven away from your eyes. Would I ever look again toward your set-apart temple? Waters encompassed me unto life. Hatehom enclosed around me. Weeds were wrapped around my head. I went down to the base of the mountains. The earth with its bars were left behind me forever. But you brought up my life from the pit, from the Phria in Greek, the Phria Tain Abysson. O Yehovah, my Elohim. So you see in this account how the literal oceans on the earth and the sea under the earth are mixed up, and the metaphors that are used are all mixed up to show us that there's a link between the two. When my life fainted within me, I remembered Yehovah, and my prayer went up to you in your set-apart temple. Those observing lying vapors forsake their own kindness, but I sacrifice to you with the voice of thanksgiving. I pay what I have vowed. Yeshua is of Yehovah. Then Yehovah spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out onto the dry land. The fish, the great fish which is at the bottom of the ocean, he spoke to it. What did he say that he would do to the serpent, which is in the sea under the earth? He said that he would command the serpent. Parallel again. Verse 7 says, and in the greatness of your excellence, you pulled down those who rose up against you. You sent forth your wrath, and it consumed them like stubble. The waters are water. His wrath is always fire. Being consumed like stubble is something that is said of fire. It's not said of water. And yet they're using this to describe what happens when the sea comes back on the Egyptians. It's prophetic. With the wind of your nostrils, the waters were heaped up. The floods stood still like a wall. Hatehom became dense in the heart of the sea. Is that what happened when they crossed over? Or did he move by the east wind? Did he part the sea and they walked over on dry land? This is what will happen in the future when a way is made for the ransomed to pass over. The depths became dense or became thickened is what the word means, which is exactly what he was talking about when we read before, that he made the sea into dry land. It's not literally what he did in that case, but it is literally what he will do when we, as the redeemed, pass over. The enemy said, I pursue, I overtake, I divide the spoil. My soul is satisfied on them. I draw out my sword, my hand destroys them. You did blow with your ruach, with your wind. The sea covered them. Or you did blow with your spirit, and the sea covered them in the prophetic sense. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, O Yehovah, among the gods? Who is like you, great in set apartness, awesome in praises, working wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. Another phrase which is used when we hear about Sheol, the earth swallowed them up and they went alive into Sheol. In your kindness, you led the people whom you have redeemed. In your strength, you guided them to your set-apart dwelling. Really? Did he? When they crossed over the Red Sea, did he lead them to Mount Zion? Didn't, did he? This is prophetic of the future. He didn't lead them to his set-apart dwelling. He led them to the other side of the Sea of Reeds. This is prophetic. Peoples heard, they trembled, anguish gripped the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom were troubled, the mighty men of Moab, trembling grips them. All the inhabitants of Canaan melted. Fear and dread fell upon them. By the greatness of your arm, they are as silent as a stone until your people pass over. O Yehovah, until the people whom you have bought pass over. Imagine the scene in Sheol when the sea is made dense, and the ransomed of YHVH pass over. Imagine the scene on the other side of Sheol. All of the kings of Edom, the inhabitants of Philistia, the people of the world look on and see the ransomed of YHVH passing over the sea, silent as a stone. Which is what we heard about before in Isaiah 52. He likewise does sprinkle many nations. Concerning him, kings shut their mouths. They're silent as a stone. For that which had not been recounted to them, they have seen, and indeed they will. And what they had not heard, they have understood, and they will in that day. You bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance. That's Mount Zion. He didn't do that. He will for us. In the place, O YHVH, which you have made for your own dwelling, the set-apart place, O YHVH, which your hands have prepared. Where did Yeshua say that he was going? What was he going to do for us? He was going to prepare a place for us, wasn't he? YHVH reigns forever and ever. For the horses of Pharaoh went with his chariots and the horsemen into the sea. And YHVH brought back the waters of the sea upon them. And the children of Israel went on dry ground in the midst of the sea. Again, when we've passed over the sea, I would be surprised if the people on the other side of Sheol didn't, like the Egyptians, rush into the midst of the sea as if they were going to make it over too. And Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aharon, took the timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. And Miriam answered them, sing to YHVH. That's what she says. For he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he is thrown into the sea. So if we think of this, when we cross over the sea, let's see what prophecy says. I saw a sea of glass mixed with fire. I've always thought this was in heaven. I don't think it's in heaven. I saw a sea of glass mixed with fire. The sea made hard becomes the lake of fire. Those overcoming the beast and his image and his mark and the number of his name, standing on the sea of glass with harps of Elohim. Just like when they passed over and they've got timbrels and the musical instruments. They sing the song of Moshe. It's always been unclear, what is the song of Moshe? Is it Hazinu? Or is it this song which is sung then? It's this song. Prophetically, it happens in exactly the same way. They sing the song of Moshe, the servant of Elohim, the song of the Lamb, saying, great and marvelous are your works. That's exactly what they've just said. YHVH El Shaddai, righteous and true are your ways, O King of the set-apart ones. The ransomed of YHVH shall return and enter Sion with singing. Exactly the same. Ransomed of YHVH return over the way that's made for them. And they enter into his holy mountain, which is what the Song of Moshe is about. They enter in with singing. Third part will be a bit shorter, and we'll deal with the rest of the parsha. Okay, everyone, we are back. For everyone who is online, obviously Ashley's in the US at the moment, and she's the one who usually does all the camera transitions and stuff like that. So she's doing it actually live from the US. We configured it so that she's able to operate the computer in there from her computer in the US. So that's what's going on. That's why it's all a bit disjointed. Now, I've put this up. Some of you will recognize this because this is the logo on the shirts that Charlie and I wear sometimes. And it's not Way Biblical Fellowship merchandise. This was made for us when we went over to the US. A guy called JD and his wife Tracy made us several shirts, actually. They made Charlie a YHVH is the King of the Universe one, which he very much likes. And they made these for us, and several people have asked if they can get one. Now, when we go back to the US, when we get to the conference in Arkansas, we're going to be meeting with JD and Tracy there. So they can bring some of these to the conference. So if anybody does want one, if you're here, tell me. And if you're not here, send me an email right now. Send an email to lightin_the_dark, LIGHTIN_DARK @hotmail.com. and just say, you know, I want one. Tell me your size. They're in unisex sizes. Tell me your size and tell me whether you want long-sleeved or short-sleeved shirts. For people who are around the world and not in England, if you come into the conference or if you come into the baptisms in North Carolina, which will be after the conference, then I can get them for you and give them to you then. But I need a number so that I can tell JD how many to make, so he can tell me how much they were going to cost to make, and then I can give everyone one who happens to want one. Well, while we're on the subject of, Charlie wants one.
The way we would go fellowship in the blue is spelled wrong to fellowship.
The one in the blue is spelt wrong. Oh yeah, fellowship. Okay, the actual ones will have the correct spelling. This is the initial design that he sent to me and I had on my computer. This is not the design of the actual shirt. Well spotted, Charlie. Now, some people will probably have noticed the shirt that I'm wearing, and that was the shirt that they made for me. And Charlie happens to be wearing his today as well, which is just really bizarre. But this is a shirt for their coffee shop. Okay, it's for a place called Nemo's Coffee. And the reason that I bring it up is because at the moment, the local government, in their wisdom, have deemed it so that they have dug up outside of their coffee shop. Okay, this is the view from their coffee shop. And as you can imagine, for a business that depends on passing trade for revenue, things aren't going so well at the moment for their coffee shop. So I mention this for people who are online, who are in Colorado, particularly Colorado Springs, but anywhere in Colorado. Get yourself to Nemo's Coffee. It's run by Torah keepers, so you'll be able to have some fellowship, possibly meet some other Torah keepers there. Who knows what Yah will work through it. And they've got amazing coffee and amazing food from all the pictures that I've seen. So get yourself along and help support fellow believers. They're not bothered. They know it's all in YHVH's hands. They're not like, oh no, what are we going to do? But we should help one another anyway. So get yourself along and get some nice coffee and some nice food. And if you want one of these shirts, maybe they'll be able to make you one. Back to the Torah portion. Verse 22 then, after the song that was sung in the Sea of Reeds, it says, and Moshe brought Israel from the Sea of Reeds, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days into the wilderness, and they found no water. Okay, imagine what this is like. They're walking day and night. They've just been camped somewhere. An army comes to destroy them. They're all terrified of what's going to happen. They're all crying out to YHVH. He delivers them. The adrenaline's been surging, I imagine, as they walk through the midst of the sea with big walls of water on either side. They get to the other side. They've just had this massive celebration. Now there's no water for 3 days. They're very, very thirsty people. One thing that we need to bear in mind, if we are the people who go to the wilderness in the future, not to complain. Complaining doesn't go well. We just need to reinforce that in ourselves. Don't be the grumblers that it speaks of that there will be in the wilderness. They came to Marah, and they were unable to drink the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. So the name of it was called Marah. And the people grumbled against Moshe, saying, what are we to drink? Then he cried out to YHVH, and YHVH showed them a tree. And when he threw it into the waters were made sweet. There he made the law a chok. Okay, it's the singular of chukat, which are often translated as statutes. Because Torah is the thing that's usually translated as law. Torah doesn't mean law. Torah means teaching, instruction, or doctrine. Okay, it's the teaching of the creator of the Torah. His statutes are his actual laws, and they're his chukat. There he made the statute, a chok, and mishpat for them. And we looked at that, it's his justice. So he made the statute and mishpat for them. There he tried them. So what we're going to see now is an example of YHVH trying his people. They cried out to YHVH, and he showed him a tree. Okay, they had no water. What do we know that the waters represent? The word. They had no water. They were unable to drink the waters because they were bitter. Okay, I think this means because the waters were bitter. But we're told that we are bitter as wormwood when we disobey. when we will not drink the water. They could not drink the water because they were bitter. YHVH showed Moshe a tree. The Torah is called the tree of life in Proverbs. I think it's Proverbs 3. When he put it into the waters were made sweet. What does it say the Torah is? The Torah is sweeter than honey. So we've got an image here of them having no word, coming to a place where there's the word, but they couldn't drink it because they were bitter. The Torah made the waters sweet, and they drank. Verse 26 says, and he said, if you diligently obey the voice of YHVH your Elohim and do what is right in his eyes, and shall listen to his commands and guard all his laws, all his statutes, his chukat, I bring on you none of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am YHVH who heals you. So this is the chuk, and this is the mishpat which he made for them. Okay, if you do this, I won't bring on you any of the diseases of Egypt. We looked a couple of weeks ago about why we are made sick, why we're sick now. Because when they went into the land, he said, I'll take all the diseases of Egypt away from you. And in the curses, we saw this. If you do not guard to do the words of this Torah that are written in this book, to fear this esteemed and awesome name, YHVH your Elohim, then YHVH shall bring upon you and your descendants extraordinary plagues, great and lasting plagues, and grievous and lasting sicknesses. And he shall bring back on you all the diseases of Egypt, of which you were afraid, and they shall cling to you. And then he goes on and says, and I'll scatter you amongst the nations. And that's where we are now, isn't it? Scattered amongst the nations, the diseases of Egypt cling to us. And we're made sick. And you looked at other reasons why sickness might be used by YHVH in our lives. But we are prone to becoming sick. They weren't. They had all the diseases of Egypt removed from them because YHVH heals us. That's what we can look forward to in the future. These things are designed to make us repent and make us see that we need YHVH and we need to turn back to following his ways. Verse 27 says, and they came to Elim, where there were 12 fountains of water, 70 palm trees, and they camped there by the water. So this is like a little bit of paradise that they come to. This is the best place that they come to in the wilderness. And what do we have? They come over the Sea of Reeds, and then they go to this amazing place. Again, prophetic of us, when we pass over the sea and we enter into Sion. Well, in there were 12 fountains of water and 70 palm trees. 12 representing, now this is speculation, 12 representing the 12 tribes of Israel, and 70 representing the nations. So there's the 12 tribes of Israel and there's the nations. And of course the nations are grafted into Israel according to the tribe that they sojourn with. But that's who will be there in Sion, even if this isn't specifically what this verse is trying to say to us. In Exodus 16 it says, they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 5th day of the 2nd Chodesh after their going out of the land of Mitzrayim. And all the congregation of the children of Israel grumbled against Moshe and Aharon in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said to them, if only we had died by the hand of YHVH in the land of Mitzrayim, when we sat by the pots of meat. Okay, and the idea of sitting by teaching is something that we see. We've looked before at the pots of meat. These words could be translated as gospel of thorns. Okay, pots of meat, gospel of thorns. And we saw the parable of the sower, and we saw those who were sowed by the wayside. It said that they sat by the gospel of thorns, which is basically, it's okay for you to be affected by the cares of this life. You don't have to follow the law. You don't have to follow righteousness. If, something comes up, some kind of matter, some kind of issue to do with money, the riches of the world choke out the word and it becomes fruitless, is what it says in the parable of the sower. So when we sat by the gospel of thorns, we ate bread to satisfaction. Bread is an idiom for the word as well. When we sat by that gospel, we ate the bread and we were satisfied by it. Made us feel good. We were happy with what we were being taught when we sat by the gospel of thorns. You've brought us into this wilderness to put all this assembly to death with hunger. Septuagint, this word is ecclesia, which is translated commonly as church. It means assembly. Put this church to death with hunger. So When they had the gospel of thorns and they read the word, they were satisfied, even though they went after the cares of this world and worries about riches and those sort of things. They were satisfied. But now, just like the Torah community have been brought out into the wilderness, and they realize, wait there, Yehovah's got a standard of righteousness. And now you're telling us that if we don't follow his standard of righteousness and we don't change ourselves, having been made clean of sin, that we'll be put to death. You're putting us to death with hunger. What do we have a hunger and a thirst for? For righteousness. If the law is written on a heart of stone, on a tablet of stone, it's a ministration of death. It brings death. It's a situation that people who've come out of the church, come out from under the gospel of thorns where they ate bread to satisfaction, are in. Now they're in a position where if they're rebellious, it puts them to death. You've brought us here to put us to death. What is the purpose in this? I recommend this teaching. Obviously, it's 40 minutes long, so I'm not going to go through it now. But this will go into detail about all of that and really unpack that for you. So just search on the YouTube channel for that. Parable of the sower says, the others who are sown among thorns, these are they who hear the word, and the worries of this age and the deceit of riches and the desires for other matters entering in choke the word, and it becomes fruitless. And this happens. You see it all the time in the Torah movement. Okay? No, I'm not going to stop working on the Sabbath. I've got worries of the world to worry about. I'm not going to follow the world. Follow the word. Chokes the word, and it becomes fruitless. What good can it do in the face of a hard heart? I'm not going to tithe. I'm not going to give any of my money to Yehovah. I'm more concerned about riches. I'm more concerned about where I'll be if I do this. I can't afford to do this. The desires for other matters, whatever it is, when it supersedes the word, it chokes the word, and the word becomes powerless. It becomes fruitless. The word only has power in our lives as we let it change us and we do the things that are required by the word. Yehovah said to Moshe, see, I am raining bread from the heavens for you, and the people should go out and gather a day's portion every day in order to try them, whether they walk in my Torah or not. You know what bread from the heavens is? It's the manna. What he says, though, is that he's going to use the manna in order to test them. It shall be on the 6th day that they shall prepare what they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. So they weren't to gather any food on the Sabbath day. They were to gather the other 6 days, and Yehovah would provide for them enough to cover the 7th day. And that was going to test them to see whether or not they would walk in the commandments. Moshe and Aharon said to all the children of Israel, at evening you shall know that Yehovah has brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim. And in the morning you shall see the esteem of Yehovah, for he hears your grumblings against Yehovah. And what are we that you grumble against us? And Moshe said, in that Yehovah gives you meat to eat in the evening, and in the morning bread to satisfaction. I can't believe that I've been through the Torah so many times and I never noticed this. It's just bizarre. I thought that he gave them quail for the first time when they complained about it. But he doesn't. He gives them the quail here. He says, you're going to eat quail in the evening. So just like, I really couldn't believe it. I've read it so many times and I just never picked up on that. For Yehovah hears your grumblings which you make against him. And what are we? Your grumblings are not against us, but against Yehovah. We get the same thing when we tell people you need to be following the Torah. And people are like, oh, Charlie and JP, they just think they're dead righteous and that we're just dead not righteous. Your grumblings aren't against us, they're against Yehovah. And Moshe said to Aharon, say to all the congregation of the children of Israel, come near before Yehovah, for he has heard your grumblings. And it came to be as Aharon spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel that they looked toward the wilderness, and see, the esteem of Yehovah appeared in the cloud. Yehovah spoke to Moshe, saying, I've heard the grumblings of the children of Israel. Speak to them, saying, between the evenings you are to eat meat. Okay, so this is the quail that he gives them. Between the evenings, we looked at this very briefly, but between the evenings, there's an early evening and there's a late evening. There's when the sun starts to go down, and that's called evening. There's the late evening, which is twilight. Okay, we're to eat the Passover between the evenings as the sun starts to go down before the next day starts. Here they're to eat the meat between the evenings. In the morning you are to be satisfied with bread. You shall know that I am Yehovah your Elohim. So we know this doesn't mean evening to the going down in the sun the next day, because in the morning they eat bread. Between the evenings, though, they're to eat meat. That's when the quail were provided. It came to be that quails came up at evening and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay all around the camp. And the layer of dew went up, and see, on the surface of the wilderness was a small round substance, as fine as frost on the ground. The children of Israel saw, and they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. And Moshe said to them, "It's the bread which Yehovah has given you to eat. This is the word which Yehovah has commanded. Let every man gather it according to each one's need, an omer for each soul, according to the number of souls. Let every man take for those who are in his tent." And the children of Israel did so, and gathered, some more, some less. And they measured it by omers, and he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. And I believe I was speaking with James one time about the way that this seems to work out. The Yehovah gives you exactly what you need. Even when you think you're gathering much, you'll have enough for what you need. And certainly when you gather little, it turns out that you have enough for what you need. Each one gathered according to his need. And Moshe said, "Let no one leave any of it until morning." Pretty simple command, isn't it? Nobody, everyone here, don't leave any of it until morning. But they did not listen to Moshe. So some of them left part of it until the morning, and it bred worms and stank, and Moshe was wroth with them. And here we've got the other group in the parable of the sower. These then are the ones by the wayside where the word is sown, and when they hear the word, Satan comes immediately and takes the word that was sown in their hearts. That's what you've got happening here, isn't it? Moshe says something. What do? They don't do it. The word's taken away. They gathered it every morning, every one according to his need. And when the sun became hot, it melted. So what they were used to, the way that their lives worked out day by day, was that if they left any of the manna until the next day, it would rot and they wouldn't have any. So that's how, the way that we think with mechanistic mindsets, when we take Yehovah out of them, that's how we think that everything's going to transpire. Life's just going to go on the way that it usually does, and Yehovah's not going to have any influence over it. Especially when it comes to Shabbat, which is what they were being tempted in. It came to be on the 6th day that they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one, and all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moshe. And he said to them, "This is what Yehovah has said. Tomorrow is a rest, a Sabbath set apart to Yehovah. That which you bake, bake, and that which you cook, cook, and lay up for yourselves all that is left over to keep it until morning. Prepare your food, have it on the Shabbat." And they laid it up until the morning, as Moshe commanded, and it did not stink, and no worm was in it. Okay, so you trust Yehovah, you do what he says. Don't work on the Sabbath, you're going to have enough. Oh no, but if we continue doing this, we're not going to have any, it's going to rot. That's what always happens. Trusted the word, or they did the word. I don't know if they trusted it. No worm was in it. Moshe said, "Eat it today, for today is the Sabbath to Yehovah. Today you do not find it in the field. Gather it 6 days, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, there is none." Not going to find any. Don't go out and work on the Sabbath. And it came to be that some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather, but they found none. Never works out. You think, I'm putting myself ahead here by doing all these things, working on the Sabbath, and that's going to give me more money. What did we learn before? If Yehovah's not in the building of the house, it will be built in vain. They found none. And Yehovah said to Moshe, "How long shall you refuse to guard my commandments, my Torah? See, because Yehovah has given you the Sabbath, therefore he's giving you bread for 2 days on the 6th day. He'll provide on the other days. Let each one stay in his place. Do not let anyone go out of his place on the 7th day." And it amazes me that people read this. Let each one stay in his place. Don't let anyone go out of his place on the Sabbath. And they go, a law for all time from Yehovah. Is it though? They went out and they went to gather food. And Yehovah said, "No, tell them everyone stays in his place on the Sabbath day." It was said to the children of Israel who were there, who were going out on the 7th day to get manna. They were told specifically in that context that they were to stay in their place. We don't all have to stay in our place on the Sabbath day. So the people rested on the seventh day. It was about the people that were there. It's not about a law for all time. And the house of Yisrael called its name manna, and it was like white coriander seed, and the taste of it was like thin cakes made with honey. And we've explored the idea before that the rabbis have, that it tasted like however you reacted to the command. If you reacted to it badly, then it tasted bad. That's not what the word says. The word says that's what it tasted like. It was like thin cakes made with honey. And Moshe said, this is the word which Yehovah commanded. Fill an omer with it to keep for your generations, so that they see the bread with which I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim. So what was important here is that they saw the bread. There's something very important in what we see. I touched on it very briefly before. But we're told to wear tzitzit so that we can see them and remember the commandments, keep the commandments. They were to see the bread. It was a witness of who Yehovah was. And sometimes he'll bring things about in our lives as a witness of who he is. It says, and Moshe said to Aaron, take a pot and put an omer of manna in it and set it down before Yehovah to keep for your generations. As Yehovah commanded Moshe, so did Aaron set it down before the witness to keep. And there were things that were put before the witness, which is to witness to people, like when they took all of the plunder, all of the gold, and they brought some to Yehovah. They were told, put it before the witness so that the children of Israel see it. And what did we see before? Yehovah said to Moshe, stretch out your hand over the sea. Moshe didn't need to stretch out his hand over the sea. It says that Yehovah affected the sea. For the things that we do are seen by other people. The things that we do with our hands, Moshe's hands representing the works of Moshe, are to be seen by other people. And this is how we preach to people. This is how we speak to people. We don't go out with placards, the end of the world is nigh. Because that just causes people to turn away from Yehovah, and it profanes his name if all you tell them is that he's a God of death and that he's going to kill them all for the way that they're living their lives. It doesn't testify to who he is. But if you live your life correctly and you do the works of Moshe before them, and you're kind and you're compassionate and you're patient with people, then they can see who Yehovah is. And the fact that people see us is important. And the children of Israel ate manna 40 years until they came to an inhabited land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. And an omer is 1/10 of an ephah. And all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sin according to the command of Yehovah, and camped in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. And if anyone's wondering, that word for sin is not chatat in the Hebrew. It's not the actual word for sin. It's the transliteration of a Hebrew word that sounds like sin. Therefore the people strove with Moshe and said, give us water to drink. And Moshe said to them, why do you strive with me? Why do you try Yehovah? So what they're doing here is they're trying him, and we'll see how they try him in a second. The people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moshe and said, why did you bring us out of Mitzrayim to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? And we have a hunger and a thirst for righteousness. When Moshe calls us out of Egypt, and the Torah calls us out of Egypt, if we want to be disobedient to it, if we don't want to do the word, then perhaps it feels like this. Why have we been brought out of Egypt to be killed with thirst, to be killed with hunger? It's not Moshe's fault though. It's our fault because our hearts are hardened to doing it. Moshe cried out to Yehovah, saying, what am I to do with this people? Yet a little and they shall stone me. And Yehovah said to Moshe, pass over before the people and take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand your rod with which you smote the river, and go. So again, something visual that he's got to take with him. See, I am standing before you on the rock in Horeb, and you shall smite the rock, and water shall come out of it, and the people shall drink. And for people who've never seen it in this before, it's a picture of Yeshua being the rock and him being smitten for us, and water coming out. It says that the living waters, the Holy Spirit, comes out from his midst. And obviously he's the Word as well. And the Word was there for people of the world to drink after Yeshua was smitten, so that they could come back in repentance to Yehovah. And Moshe did so before the eyes of the elders of Israel. And he called the name of that place Massah and Meribah because of the strife of the children of Israel, and because they tried Yehovah, and this is what they did. saying, is Yehovah in our midst or not? So trusting in Yehovah when circumstances happen in your life, that's good. You trust in him. If he said to do something in his word, then you do it. And you can trust in him in that. That's what he says to do. But you don't try him. Okay, you don't put yourself in a position where he's got to act. And you say, is Yehovah Elohim or is he not Elohim? Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moshe said to Yehoshua, choose for us men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I am stationing myself on the top of the hill with the rod of Elohim in my hand. The rod of Elohim. Can anyone remember what the rod of Elohim is? Anyone know? When he was at the burning bush, this happened. Take this rod in your hand, and with which you shall do the signs. Now, it wasn't him that was doing the signs. It was Yehovah that was doing the signs, of course. But again, it was this visual symbol that he had. It witnessed to Pharaoh, if you like. But this is what the rod of Elohim is. And Yehoshua did as Moshe said to him to fight with Amalek. And Moshe, Aharon, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And it came to be when Moshe held up his hand that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. And Amalek, in this particular part of the narrative, is a picture of our perpetual enemy, Hasatan. When Moshe held his hand up, or when Moshe's hands were upheld, as we'll see in the next verse, Israel prevailed. Moshe's hands, again, being the works of Moshe. Your hands are always represented with you, representative of your works in Scripture. So when the works of Moshe during the Torah were upheld, Israel, us, prevailed. But when we don't do the Torah of Moshe, the enemy prevails, because the enemy comes as a tempter to us to get us to not do the works of Moshe. But Moshe's hands were heavy, so they took a stone, put it underneath him, and he sat on it. And Aharon and Hur supported his hands. Aharon, as we'll see probably as we go through the rest of the Torah, is a picture very much of Yeshua. Aharon, the high priest, a picture of our high priest. So you've got Yeshua and you've got Hur. Who was Hur? He was one of the leaders of Israel, one of the people at the top in Israel. So we've got Moshe's hands being upheld by Yeshua and by the leaders. One on one side and the other on the other. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. They're the two people who are to help you in these things, to uphold Moshe's hands. Yehoshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword, which is what we will see at the end. Yehovah said to Moshe, write this in the book and recite it in the hearing of Yehoshua, that I shall completely blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heavens. And this is what will happen as well with Hasatan. Moshe built an altar and called its name Yehovah Nisi, which means Yehovah is my banner. Okay. Not really sure. Yehovah is my banner. I can kind of see where it's going. For he said, because a hand is on the throne of Yah, Yehovah is to fight against Amalek from generation to generation. I don't know about you, but when I read this, I was like, what does it mean? A hand is on the throne of Yah? Is that his right hand, Yeshua? He's on the throne? Is that what it's saying? Could be. Well, I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to look in the Septuagint and see if that makes it any clearer. Septuagint says, Moses built an altar to Yehovah and called the name of it Yehovah my refuge. And that fits in with what else we've seen in the Torah portion. Could be my banner. If it's my banner, it makes sense enough to me. This makes more sense. For with a secret hand, Yehovah wages war upon Amalek to all generations. Or with a hidden hand, he wages war on Amalek to all generations, which is a lot more descriptive of how he is with Hasatan. Well, that's the end of the Torah portion. And said, I think that part was a little bit shorter, but I think that we should pray and thank Yehovah. Father, thank you for your word, and thank you for the amazing things that you show us in it. Thank you that we get to be like you. I ask, Father, if anybody's heart is hardened, that you would chastise them and bring them back onto the path. You would be close with them, and you would be as a father to them. Thank you for your Sabbath, Father. And thank you for each other, that we get to come together and talk about you and fellowship and be together in this place that you've given to us. You are amazing, Father. And the more that I see of you, the more that I'm brought low. I pray, Father, be with us. Help us on this walk. I thank you for your love and your patience and your compassion that you show towards us. I thank you for the opportunity that you've given for us to be chosen before you. I just pray, Father, that you'll help us be there with you in that day, and that we won't be among those who are silent and ashamed that you come in. Thank you, Father. Amen.